Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto training neglected by Kakashi part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Naruto rubbed his aching head as he came to, climbing to his feet shakily. What? The memory came back in a flash, distorted by a distinct crimson haze. The grass shinobi mused quietly, Naruto in her grasp. It seems the Kyuubi brat is still alive. Oh. The ninja looked amused as she studied the intricate seal on the boy's stomach. When you use the beast's chakra, the seal becomes visible. The Kyuzugaku Kunoichi moved her right hand behind herself, a mini purple fire lighting up on each fingertip. Naruto thrashed in her grasp, trying desperately to free himself. The ninja's amazingly long tongue, however, would not relinquish him from its grasp. Hey! He shouted, wriggling as much as the foreign appendage would allow. Let me go! The super-powerful grass ninja, who was actually Orochimaru in disguise, thrust his flaming fingers into Naruto's unprotected abdomen, crying, Gojio Fuin! Naruto's face contorted into a silent scream as the Hibi Sennin's agile digits dug into his stomach, clenching around the soft flesh. The red bled from his irises as the Kyuubi's chakra disappeared, returning his eyes to their natural blue. His canine teeth shrunk to their original size and his nails were once more blunt and soft. Then, without warning, the blond boy slumped unconscious. Ugh, he groaned softly. What did that snake freak do to me? He looked around, his expression dazed. Where? Frozen tundra is what he saw, with snowy banks that stretched for miles, far beyond his human line of sight. Several trees, barren of any sign of life and covered by a thick layer of ice, littered the rolling slopes. Something soft and small landed on his nose, quickly melting into water as it dribbled down his face. He reached out, catching petite, white fuzz in his palm. It was snowing, he realized, though with the blankets of the stuff that covered the ground, it was difficult to distinguish the tiny flakes falling from the sky. The slate-gray clouds didn't make it any easier, either, as they blocked out the sun and left only a minuscule bit of light for him to see with. Despite the abominable weather, however, he didn't feel cold at all. His eyes widened, surprise and confusion in their sapphire depths. Where am I? Last he remembered, he'd been in the Forest of Death during the second part of the Chunin selection exams, and he had fought against an impossibly strong Kyuzugaku ninja. He had been surrounded by trees and roots, each of which was easily 3 times the size of normal foliage. So where was he now? The only place that had snow, according to what he'd been taught, was the frigid Yuki no Kuni, the land of snow. Even Yuki no Kuni, however, had never been reported to have trees covered in ice. If he wasn't in the land of snow, one of the only places that suffered through winter, then where could he be? On this plain of never-ending ice and snow, the blonde thought in a rare philosophical moment, did I die? So, a deep voice like the rolling thunder spoke. Nearly jumping out of his skin, Naruto turned at near light speed, coming face to face with a huge blue dragon. You're finally here. Its scales were smooth and slick and reflected the minuscule light perfectly, which gave them an ice-like shine. Atop its head was a crown of spikes, each of which jutted backwards like shards of broken glass. Its nostrils were thin and narrow, almost serpentine, but its breath did not leave clouds of condensation behind. Tell me, can you hear my name? The dragon moved closer, its glowing red eyes boring into his own. Can you call out to me, to Hyarinmaru? Is that you? Naruto asked, voice low and quavering with fear and awe. His eyes were wide and his breathing came out in shaky rasps. His heart thumped loudly. Are you Hyarinmaru? The dragon seemed to grin, bearing 2 rows of shiny, carnivorous teeth. So, you can hear. A burst of warm breath came from its nostrils. After years of having your ears plugged by the 9-tailed fox, you can finally hear me. The fox? Naruto parroted, his features quickly contorting into rage. What does he have to do with anything? Do not be so quick to hate, child. A second burst of breath came, knocking Naruto off his feet. He fell on his butt with a soft grunt. If it were not for that beast, you would likely have failed to survive your rough childhood. Blocked me from you, he may have, but kept you alive, he did, even if it was in self-interest. What? Naruto looked shocked. But how? He protected you when I could not, the dragon responded. He healed you when others would have waned away into nothing. He soothed you when sleep would not come to your young mind. But that was all his fault to begin with. Naruto protested loudly. If he hadn't attacked Konoha, then he wouldn't have gotten his fuzzy butt sealed, and I would have had a normal life. Do not be so quick to judge, Hyarinmaru purred. The fault of the Nine-Tails attack lies in the Uchiha, and their accursed bloodline. The one called Madara. The dragon's eyes flashed. Were it not for that evil man, the beast would not be where he is. Naruto looked confused. What does the Uchiha clan? That I cannot answer, the serpentine beast interrupted, anticipating his question. I only know what information I can glean from the beast and his mutterings. Oh, Naruto said lamely. He glanced around, somewhat unnerved by the dragon's unblinking stare. So what are you? There was huff from the creature in front of him, almost like an amused chuckle, but Naruto dared not imagine he was right. Despite this, the dragon's tone was serious when it responded, I am the piece of your soul dedicated to fighting. I am the part of you that never gives up, even when your body is frail and defeated. There was something powerful in the beast's voice as it continued, its pitch rising, I am the wrath of heaven, the instrument with which you slay your foes. I am the lord of ice and snow, the master of all things water. I am the frigid bite of death. I am your sword and your shield, and I shall protect you until the bitter end. Its voice rose to a roar, I am Hirinmaru. It bowed its head submissively, startling Naruto with a foreign gesture, now command me, and raise your enemies to the ground. A sudden feeling of power rushed through his body, and he felt like he could do anything, beat anyone, and overcome any obstacle. It was like molten lava flowing through his veins, and with nothing but confidence, he reached out to touch the spiked crown of Hirinmaru's head. The strange world disappeared in a flash of bright light. Naruto woke, with a gasp, his head aching and his stomach sore. It felt as though he'd been run through with a katana, as though the metal had pierced the flesh of his belly and been left there to bleed him out. Ha! There was a loud thud, as of meat hitting the ground. Sakura's voice cried out in a soft shout, a vicious crack renting the air, a crack like that of bones breaking, shattered by the blunt force of the unforgiving earth. Naruto's mind was hazy, as though clouded by a thick fog he had no way of escaping. Ugh! What's that noise? Kin, out of the way! The words were thick and seemed shrouded in a heavy mist. A blast of wind leapt to life, sprinkling his body with a cool breeze. There were 3 sharp clunks and a soft explosion sound, one that Naruto recognized as belonging to a kawarimi. It's so noisy! God, my head is pounding. His skull pulsed with pain, as if someone had drilled several holes in his head. He let out a soft hiss through his teeth. Useless! Another rush of wind, this time closer than before, showered him with harsh air that whipped his skin raw. His ears twitched at the dark scoff that followed. Shut up! You're so annoying! You're not fooling anyone. 3 more thunks, followed once more by the soft explosion of the body replacement technique. Naruto's brow furrowed in annoyance, his lips twisted into a scowl. Shut up! One more time, and I'll... Get serious! Another thud, this time heavier, followed by a surprised gasp and the smell of blood leaking from fresh wounds. There was a muffled cry of pain, feminine in nature, and several loud whacks as someone hit something repeatedly. Then, a thud as something or someone was thrown bodily to the ground. That's it! That's it! Someone's gonna die! Blue eyes snapped open, a harsh voice whispering, No more Mr. Nice Guy. He stood in one fluid motion, fingers wrapping around the hilt of a sword that he never had before, but one that sent a satisfied rush through his veins. The world halted before his frigid gaze, his sapphire eyes sweeping the forest around him, narrowed in cold fury he never felt before. His grasp on his sword tightened. Naruto, Sakura whispered dully from her spot on the ground, one eye already swelling shut. She looked surprised to see him, like he was some phantom specter back from the dead. What the? The ninja with spiky black hair asked confusedly. Weren't you out cold a few seconds ago? Naruto focused his icy gaze on the sound genin, words tumbling past his lips before he knew what he was saying. Soten and I's ace, Hirinmaru. Sit upon the frozen heaven's ice ring. Everyone waited for something to happen, but nothing did, and the spiky-haired genin smirked, a cocky gleam in his eye. He scoffed, was something supposed to happen? Zaku! The bandaged one scolded, wary of this new opponent. This was not the Uzumaki Naruto they had been told to expect. In a blur, Naruto had moved to stand in front of the one identified as Zaku, already in mid-swing. Startled, Zaku stumbled backwards in a clumsy effort to dodge. Steel glinted and several locks of black hair fell to the ground as the sound genin landed on his butt. Zaku, shocked at the pure speed of his enemy, could only stare. Instantly, Naruto was upon him again, both hands grasping the hilt as his blade came down in a graceful arc. Zaku yelped, rolling backward over his shoulder only to land straight on his feet, crouched defensively. He looked like a frightened animal too scared to move. As Naruto moved to continue his assault, Zaku channeled chakra into his legs and leapt as far away as his enhanced limbs would allow, preparing his own attack as he went. Air compressed, chakra funneled, and Zaku aimed, Zankuha. A gale of tightly packed wind rushed from Zaku's palms, targeting the motionless Naruto, whose icy gaze had not wavered. Zaku grinned, knowing that there was no way the blonde boy could dodge at this range. Naruto jumped. It wasn't a small jump, like a hop, but a full-blown leap that carried him at least 24 feet into the air, where gravity seemed to lose its hold on him as he once more swung his sword. Zaku nearly palmed his face, wondering what kind of idiot swung at nothing during a life-or-death battle. From the downward arc of the blade, a winding, icy blue Japanese dragon soared, its eyes red and its jaw wide. It was headed straight for him, and he was too surprised to even think of dodging. It was like something had frozen him to his spot, and no matter how much he told himself to move, he couldn't. Zaku. At the last second, Dosu called out his name and Zaku finally responded, vaulting from his spot as the sapphire beast closed in on him. He felt a frigid chill nick his left arm, but paid it no attention. A gasp from his female teammate caught his attention, and he looked back to where he'd previously been standing, his eyes widening. Behind him, there was a patch of ice easily a meter in diameter. The grass formed into tiny rigid spikes that he could tell would pierce straight through his sandals. He moved his arms in an effort to push himself up, but his left one was heavy and cumbersome. He glanced down and couldn't help the gasp of air that left his lungs, a horrified glint in his eyes. His left arm, from the elbow down, was covered in a thick block of ice. A soft thump announced Naruto landing next to him, and Zaku channeled more chakra, flinging out his good arm, Zankuha. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto deflected the attack with his sword, despite how impossible such an act was. Eyebrow twitching, he spun on his heel, blocking the attack from Zaku's male teammate Dosu. Metal clashed and sparks flew, Dosu's gauntlet pushing against Hirinmaru. Ice crept from the point of contact, slowly consuming Dosu's arm in a heavy layer of crystallized water. Surprised, Dosu tried to get away, but Naruto's left hand sneaked out and locked his elbow in a grasp as strong as steel. He wriggled, but Naruto's grip was firm and unwavering. Once the gauntlet was completely frozen over, Naruto let go of Dosu and brought his sword up as his enemy stumbled. With all of his strength, he slammed the butt of his sword's hilt into the metal glove, smashing it to pieces mercilessly. Dosu yowled as he fell backwards, clutching at his severely injured right arm. Several scratches decorated the lacerated skin, and the bone felt like it had broken at the point of impact. Spikes of pain lanced up and down the entirety of his arm, his pulse pounding against the flesh. "Leave your scroll and go," Dosu's head jerked up at the icy intonation, his mind taking forever to process what his ears were telling him. After all of this, the broken arm and gauntlet, Zaku's frozen limb, and a show of power so unreal that he felt as though he was dreaming, this boy was letting them leave? "Leave your scroll and go," Naruto repeated coldly, his eyes more frigid than Yuki no Kuni. Dosu could only nod dumbly. With his good arm, he reached into his kunai pouch and pulled out a scroll decorated with the kanji for earth. Setting it down slowly, he motioned to his teammates silently. They left without another word. As soon as the team of Sound Genin had vanished, Naruto picked up the scroll, turning to show it off. He grinned, displaying it proudly. "Look, Sakura-san. I got us a scroll." Sakura blinked, absent-mindedly wondering what had happened to Sakura-chan, then nodded slowly. Questions zipped through her head at blinding speeds, leaving her to wonder just what she had witnessed not more than a minute before. That sword, where had Naruto gotten it? She took a closer look at it. The hilt was wrapped in azure cloth, and the cap at the bottom appeared to be made of some sort of bronze, or perhaps even gold. The handguard just beneath the blade was made in the design of a four-pointed star, also appearing to be composed of gold. The blade itself was an oddity as well. The metal gleamed with a soft silver glint that belied its true purpose, and the steel appeared to be as smooth as glass. Unlike the standard ninja sword, like a kodachi or a ninjato, the blade had majestic curve to it and was quite long. It seemed to be the size of an ordinary katana, which was a big sword for someone of Naruto's stature. She shivered. The edge was what grabbed her attention the most. She knew, without even testing it, that the blade's edge was sharp enough to cut through most targets. She almost wanted to see if it could slice a shuriken in half, just to get a more accurate judge of its abilities. Abilities. That's the word. Even more unusual than the weapon's composition was the abilities it had revealed. She wondered if it was the actual sword or if Naruto was simply channeling jutsu through it. After all, what blade can fire a dragon of ice at the wielder's opponent? What sword can freeze an enemy simply by contact? Sakura jerked at the sound of scraping metal, looking over at her blonde teammate. A navy blue sheath was slung over his right shoulder, tied there by a strand of iron ninja wire, and he was easing his sword into it delicately. He grinned at her, and she could only smile awkwardly. That just brought up more questions. Where had the sheath come from? Naruto hadn't been carrying it with him when the exam had started. He hadn't been carrying the sword either. He didn't know anything about sealing weapons. So what did that leave? Where had the sword and sheath come from? The whole thing was giving her a headache. Hey! Naruto looked over as a girl jumped down from the trees, her brown hair tied up in two buns on the top of her head. Her white-eyed teammate frowned. That's a nice sword you have. Yeah, Naruto chuckled. He's great, ain't he? I'll say, she whistled. The hilt is amazing in and of itself, but the blade. I've never seen something of this quality before. She giggled, so he? Yeah, Naruto grinned. His name's Hyrinmaru. He's the best sword you'll ever see. I can see that, she too grinned, and his owner isn't anything to sneeze at either. I've seen quite a few blades, but this one is something else. I didn't know it was possible to channel jutsu through weapons like that. Even the White Fang's sword couldn't manage something so advanced. She let her eyes rove over the hilt, taking in its splendor. So, did your Jonin-sensei teach you that? Naruto blinked, cocking his head to the side. Teach me what? She resisted the urge to arch an eyebrow. You know, that dragon thing. He looked her oddly. She motioned with her arms as if swinging a sword, saying, where you just swing and this dragon comes out and attacks your enemies? Oh, that recognition lit up in Naruto's eyes. That's Hyrinmaru. But I thought Hyrinmaru was the sword, she stated lamely, confusedly. He's both, Naruto told her matter-of-factly. He's the dragon and the sword. But that means, she started, scrunching her face up as she put together the implications that statement brought. If this Hyrinmaru was both the sword and the dragon, that meant that you have a dragon sealed inside of that sword? Something like that, Naruto admitted sheepishly. Truth be told, he wasn't sure himself. All he knew was that Hyrinmaru was both his sword and the dragon, and so long as that didn't interfere with anything, he was going to leave well enough alone. As long as it worked, he didn't care about the how. She opened her mouth and closed it several times, but nothing came out. Finally, she decided upon an excited grin, giggling girlishly. She turned to leave, throwing a wave over her shoulder. You're an interesting guy. So let's meet again, Naruto-san. Don't lose, okay? Leaping into the trees, she and her team disappeared into the dense foliage. Naruto couldn't help the grin that threatened to split his face. That girl was quite an interesting one. She was kind of strange, he had to admit, because it wasn't every day you found a girl so obsessed with weapons. He didn't really care though, because she was interested in him as a person, and that made her okay in his book. That teammate of hers, though, Neji, was someone that Naruto figured he better watch out for. Lee had told him that Neji was the strongest genin in the entire village of Konoha, and Lee himself had easily beaten Naruto. If Neji was even stronger than Lee, that meant that Naruto would definitely have to keep an eye on the taijutsu prodigy, Hyuga Neji. His thoughts were interrupted by Sakura's excited cry of, Sasuke-kun. I say we open the scrolls, Naruto said, injecting his opinion. After roughly 3 hours of non-stop running, Team 7 had finally made it to the tower where they promptly got into a fight about what to do. Idiot! Sakura punched Naruto over the head, a vein popping out on her brow. Enko-san said not to open the scrolls. We'd get disqualified. She was talking about before we got to the tower. Naruto shouted back, rubbing the bump forming on his cranium. Besides, we would probably still be looking for a second scroll if I hadn't tricked the snake freak into burning a decoy. I don't care. Sakura fumed, glaring at him. I'm not about to let you and your stupidity get Sasuke-kun disqualified from the Chunin exams. It's logic, Naruto argued, blue eyes burning. We're in the tower with no one to greet us. The only explanation is that the scrolls have something to do with our qualification into the next part of the exams. Since when do you know anything about logic? Sakura demanded rhetorically. I'm not going to let you take any chances. This is one of the most important milestones in Sasuke-kun's life. You're not going to mess that up. Geez. Naruto flung his hands up in exasperation, rolling his eyes. For the smartest girl in the academy, you sure are pretty dumb. What did you say? Sakura's voice rose. I dare you to say that to my face. I said, Naruto yelled back, you're dumb. Come here, you little. Sakura reached for his neck, fingers twitching dangerously. Hey guys, both of them froze as Sasuke looked at them with his serious face. Naruto thought it made him look constipated. I think we should open the scrolls. Naruto palmed his face as Sakura squealed and crooned about how right her Sasuke-kun was, and about how he always had the best ideas. Even after the mess with the three-sound ninja, she still found it prudent to be Sasuke's little cheerleader. Ugh, he muttered to himself. Why did I even like her anyway? Come on, Baka! Sakura pulled him by the sleeve of his jacket, shoving the heaven scroll into his stomach forcefully. Help me open the scrolls. Grudgingly peeling open the scroll given to him, he stared at its contents. Several characters were written down, focused around single kanji in the center. Naruto blinked. Jin? As soon as the word left his lips, the scrolls began to smoke and sizzle in their hands. Naruto nearly dropped it as Sasuke spoke again, his tone urgent. Naruto, Sakura, throw the scrolls away. Trusting the Uchiha to know what he was talking about, his teammates hurled the scrolls at the floor several feet away, watching as the smoke rose to an apex and exploded outwards. As the smoke began to clear, however, a shade could be seen within the dispersing cloud. Team 7 tensed, prepared to fight whatever had appeared from their scrolls. Naruto blinked in surprise, then grinned. Iruka-sensei. True enough, the smog dissipated, revealing their trusted academy teacher, Yumino Iruka. He grinned at them, waving in a friendly gesture. Hey guys. It's been a while, huh? Sakura stared confused. Iruka-sensei, what just happened? Oh well, Iruka rubbed the back of his neck. The summoning spell on the scrolls was designed to let us tune and greet the applicants at the end of the second exam. It's just luck that I was the one who wound up meeting you three. Congratulations. You all passed the second exam. If we had sneaked a peek at the scrolls before the exam was over, Sasuke started, what would you have done, Iruka-sensei? Iruka scratched his temple with his index finger, sharp as ever. Huh, Sasuke? He shrugged. Our orders were very specific. Anyone who opened a scroll too soon was to be knocked out until the end of the second exam. His expression softened. Listen, about the third exam, don't overdo things, okay? The three genin looked at him, blinking in surprise. He continued, I mean it. I worry about you guys. Especially you, Naruto. Don't worry about me, Iruka-sensei, Naruto grinned, fingering the hilt of his sword. Belatedly, Iruka realized he'd had it the entire time they'd been talking. No one in this exam is a match for Hyarinmaru. Iruka's eyes widened as, for a second, a translucent blue dragon appeared, hovering protectively over Naruto's shoulder. Its serpentine body and tail were coiled around the boy's feet, and its red eyes were menacing. It bared its sharp teeth in a vicious snarl. Then, an instant later, it was gone, and he seemed to be the only one who'd seen it. He grinned, rubbing his neck sheepishly. Yeah, I guess so, huh? The Hokage looked over the assembled genin, resisting the overwhelming compulsion to smile when he saw Naruto among them. 21 had made it, the majority of them from his own village. 9 of them were rookies and another 3 were a team that was only about a year old, having graduated the year previous. It did his heart good to see such strength and courage in one so young. In the front of the room stood a group consisting of Chunin, Jonin, and the Hokage. Protruding from the front wall was a pair of stone hands forming the seal for Ram. Anko smirked at them from where she stood. Congratulations on passing. Hokage-sama will now explain the third test, so listen carefully. The Sandaime took a step forward. Before we begin, there is something I'd like you to know. He tugged his hat down slightly, bearing the kanji for fire imprinted upon its center. Why do we have all the alliance countries taking this exam together? To promote friendship amongst the countries, to raise the level of shinobi. I don't want you to be confused about the true meaning. This exam is a replacement for war among the allied countries. Sandaime's face was impassive as he took a puff on his pipe. If you go back in time, the current allies were enemies who fought each other over who would rule. In order to prevent wasteful fighting, the stage that those countries chose for fighting, that is the origin of the Chunin exams. What do you mean? Tenten asked confusedly. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Inuzuka Kiba shouted. I thought the point was to select Chunin. Sarutobi continued, undaunted by the questions thrown at him. It is true that this exam decides who is to become Chunin, but it is also an opportunity for the different countries to show off their ninja to the important figures who watch this third exam. A shinobi village is only as strong as its weakest link. Whatever, the red-headed Gaara muttered darkly. Could you wrap up this philosophical talk and get down to the life and death stuff anytime soon? Humph. If you insist. He paused for a second, on to the third exam. Actually, a sick-looking Jonin appeared in front of the Hokage. As referee, Hokage-sama, if I may? Sandaime nodded, a small smile on his face. By all means. The Jonin turned toward the genin, revealing his weary face and the dark bags under his eyes. I am Gecko Hate and I am the referee. Before the third test, I'm afraid we'll have to hold a preliminary. Since we are going to begin right away, I must ask any who wish to quit to do so now. Preliminary? Kiba echoed. Right now? Well, Gecko coughed. It's not as if the first two tests weren't challenging enough. On the contrary, they were quite difficult. We still have too many applicants, however, and like Hokage-sama said, there will be plenty of nobles watching. What does that have to do with anything? Kiba retorted. Gecko coughed again. The nobles will be traveling from all over to see the third exam, so the exam itself has to be quick and speedy to maintain viewer interest. To do that, we need to cut down the number of applicants with this preliminary round. As I said earlier, any who wish to quit may do so now without adversely affecting your teammates' chances of success. Well, Yakushi Kabuto raised his hand. I'm out of here. What? Naruto demanded sharply. Kabuto-senpai, why are you quitting? I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, Kabuto sighed, but I got the crap beat out of me in the second exam. And ever since that little fight I got into with those sound ninja right before the first exam, I've been totally deaf in my left ear. Kabuto shook his head. Now they're saying this could be a fight to the death. I'm just not up to that. Questioning stares followed his retreating back as he left, sparing a short, unnoticeable glance at Naruto and Sasuke. Hate looked around. Right then, cough, cough, if no one else wishes to forfeit, let's begin the preliminary rounds. If you'll turn your attention to the screen behind me. Everyone turned his or her gazes to the large screen behind the sickly Jonin, watching as the blackness faded into a dark gray. The letters versus lit up in the very center. Above them was the name Uchiha Sasuke and below it was Akado Yoroi. Now, Hate said if these two participants would come to the front. Sasuke grinned as he and Yoroi moved towards the examiner, each confident of their own ability. Gecko Hate made a motion towards the stands. Now if everyone else would please leave the arena. When everyone had left the area for the stands, he said, please begin. Yoroi made a hand seal, teasing, are you ready, Sasuke-kun? He slipped his left hand into his kunai pouch, his right hovering in front of his stomach. He withdrew a few shuriken, while, simultaneously, Sasuke withdrew a kunai from the holster on his thigh. Without warning, Yoroi flung his shuriken at Sasuke, who knocked them away with a swipe of his kunai. A flash of inexplicable weakness brought Sasuke to the ground, kunai still in hand. Yoroi took the opportunity to try and attack Sasuke, trying to bring his hand down on Sasuke's head. Sasuke rolled and dodged, watching the other genin's hand sink into the tile floor. Plunging his kunai into ground as a break, Sasuke spun around and brought Yoroi's legs from under him, pulling the older genin into a painful-looking arm lock. Yoroi's hand grabbed Sasuke's shirt firmly, and suddenly, Sasuke felt himself growing weaker. Too weak to prevent it, Sasuke could only watch as Yoroi twisted himself free of Sasuke's grip and brought his hand down on the Uchiha's chest. Hard. Jerking up, Yoroi spun around and latched that same hand on Sasuke's head, sapping the younger boy's strength. You're stealing my chakra, Sasuke gasped weakly. Yoroi chuckled darkly, an evil grin hidden beneath the cloth on his face. So you finally noticed. With a sudden surge of strength, Sasuke kicked him off, standing up as fast as he could. A scowl lit up his face as he tried to reason out the cause of the unexplained weakness, but no answer would come. Was it the curse mark? But wouldn't he feel something from it if that was what was bothering him? Yoroi growled as he stood back up. He rushed Sasuke again, his technique charged and ready to go. With a burst of speed, Sasuke ducked under his attempt at grappling and sent a kick into the boy's chin, forcing the genin into the air. As fast as his body would allow, Sasuke followed him, appearing beneath Yoroi's airborne body. Sasuke sent a light poke to his opponent's back. It's over. Using the other genin's spine, Sasuke flipped over his enemy's body, kicking towards his stomach. It was blocked and Sasuke used the teen's arm as a springboard, landing a vicious backhand in his face. Still twisting, he fired a punch into Yoroi's stomach, knocking the air from his body. Now only a few feet above the ground, Sasuke used his momentum to bring a solid kick into Yoroi's body, forcing him to collide painfully with the ground and Sasuke's foot at the same time. Sure, Rindan, Sasuke said. With his opponent unconscious and his fight won, Sasuke collapsed on his butt, panting heavily. Hate bent over Yoroi, checking for signs of unconsciousness. When he found his answer, he shouted to the stadium, Akado Yoroi is unable to continue. Uchiha Sasuke wins the first round. As Kakashi took Sasuke from the stadium and medics took away Yoroi, the screen lit up with the next combatants, Zaku Abumi vs Abirame Shino. Zaku smirked, confident of his victory, his left arm thawed. Who's this loser? When both had entered the stadium and stood in front of Hate, the referee said, "We will now begin the second match." The remaining genin watched the match unfold, wincing a bit as Shino got hit by Zaka's Zankuha. Hinata was worried about him. Will Shino-kun be alright? Kiba, her other teammate, smirked. I wouldn't worry about Shino. He's one of the guys even I don't want to fight. Niji gazed lazily at the fight, disinterest in his pale gaze. For a rookie, this guy isn't so bad. But can he win this? Tenten grimaced when Zaka's arms were damaged, severely hindering their movement. It seems he can and did. Down in the stadium, Hate shouted, "Winner, Abirame Shino!" The screen lit up again as Zaku was carried away on a stretcher, Tsurugi Misumi vs. Kankuro. Kankuro bested his opponent relatively quickly. Tsurugi had attacked and supposedly broke his neck, only to discover that he was attacking a puppet. Kankuro had pulled himself from the mass of bandages on the floor, revealing that he was safe and unharmed. With practiced ease, Kankuro crushed his opponent, almost literally. In less than a minute after it started, Hate said, "Winner, Kankuro." Ino and Sakura's match ended in an anticlimactic draw. They were too evenly matched to take the other down, so they finished with a double knockout. The screen lit up for the 5th time, reading Temari vs. Tenten. This turned out to be the worst matchup for Tenten. Her weapons couldn't reach her opponent at all, and she was defeated easily. Temari had beaten her brutally, as evidenced by the fact that she had caught the weapons mistress on her fan. Tenten's back bent at an unhealthy angle. Lee had gotten angry and was ready to fight, but Guy held him back. Lee, still angry, nodded and relinquished his fighting pose. For now. Naro Shikamaru vs. Kintsuchi. A girl? Shikamaru asked, as if looking for confirmation. He sighed, Mendokosai. Their match didn't last very long either. Kin had Shikamaru caught in her trap for a few moments, but Shikamaru had come back and outdone her. Using his Kageme no Jutsu, he forced her to hit her head against the wall. She knocked herself unconscious and Shikamaru was declared the winner. After Kin was carried away on a stretcher, the screen flashed again, revealing the combatants of the next fight, Uzumaki Naruto vs. Inuzuka Kiba. Ha! We got lucky, Akamaru! Kiba gloated, jumping down into the arena. Akamaru, his dog, gave an enthusiastic bark of agreement. Excited to finally have his match, Naruto flung himself over the railing, landing on the tiled floor with surprising ease. There was a huge grin on his face, one that was easily matched by his opponent. Hate stood between them. Hey, Kiba clenched his fist. I feel bad for you, so I'll end this in one punch. Yeah right, dog breath. Naruto shot back. Why don't you and your master go back to chasing cats? Akamaru isn't my master, Kiba shouted vehemently, glaring. He's my partner. Prove it, Naruto called coolly. Kiba growled. The 7th match, Uzumaki Naruto vs. Inuzuka Kiba, Hate said calmly. Begin. Kiba's hands instantly clasped together in a hand seal, Ninpo, Shikyaku no Jutsu. Ninja arts, four-legged technique. The Inuzuka heir got down on all fours, his body becoming more feral and animalistic in appearance. His canines lengthened into fangs and his fingernails into claws, sharp and pointed. Without warning, he dashed for his opponent, intent on winning with a single attack. Naruto, too surprised to do anything, was hit solidly in the stomach. He collided painfully with the stadium wall, crumbling a small portion of it. It's over, Hayate-san, Kiba said confidently, a smirk on his lips. He won't be getting up. Up in the stands, Yohi Kurinai, Kiba's teacher, smirked over at Hataki Kakashi. Looks like your student doesn't belong in this exam, Kakashi-san. And no, surprisingly, it was meek little Hinata that spoke up. Naruto-kun is much stronger than that. As the smoke and rubble from the collision dispersed, Naruto stood up, rubbing his stomach with a wince. He grinned, You're stronger than I thought. He unsheathed the sword on his back, the scabbard disappearing into thin air. Several people gasped, and Naruto's grin widened. Let's see how you fare. A katana? Kenjutsu? Kurinai glared at Kakashi. How could you be so irresponsible? Teaching that kind of thing to a genin? I didn't, Kakashi responded neutrally. Either he's been hiding it in a scroll all this time, or he got it during the second exam. Snarling, Kiba leapt at Naruto claws first, swiping towards his opponent's chest. Holding his weapon one-handed, the blonde deflected the blow easily, knocking Kiba to the side. A dark growl rising up in his chest, the Inuzuka turned around, taking another swing. Again, Naruto deflected it, flinging a foot out to trip the other boy. Kiba tumbled, head first, to the ground, his momentum carrying him several feet. Rolling, he flipped back onto his feet, digging his nails into the tile in an effort to slow his movement. An angry snarl curled at his lips, exposing his large incisors to all of the shinobi present. He reached into his kunai pouch, pulling out 3 smoke bombs. He flung them, watching as they exploded and shrouded Naruto in a thick cloud. He grinned, seeing Akamaru sneak up behind the blonde. This tactic was one he knew would work, and it was definitely to his advantage. His enemy couldn't see, but he could smell where his opponent was, and that left Kiba with the upper hand. A scream alerted him to his pup's success, and he let a smirk crack his face. Naruto grabbed the dog by the scruff of its neck, awkwardly putting his hands into a seal. A poof later, a second Naruto stood next to him, and he handed the puppy to his doppelganger, glaring. It was difficult, considering the amount of smoke clouding his vision. Scowling, he got his hands into another seal, channeling his chakra like he'd seen Kakashi do. In a burst of energy, the smoke dispersed and was blown away, much like the mist had when his sensei had used the skill. The bite, the dog, the smoke, it was all worth it to see the smirk on Kiba's face fall. Let Akamaru go, Kiba snarled, eyes blazing with fury. What do you take me for, a fool? Naruto arched an eyebrow. Fine, Kiba reached into his pouch again, have it your way. He tossed a small pill, which Akamaru promptly swallowed, his fur turning red as he growled. He spun, his claws dispelling the clone that held him. Running, he rushed past the stunned blonde to stand faithfully next to his partner, Kiba. Now! Kiba bent down, hands in a seal as Akamaru jumped atop his back. Jujin Bunshin. Manbi's clone. In a burst of smoke, a second Kiba had appeared in the place of the dog, smirking viciously at his opponent. Naruto blinked, surprised that such a technique even existed. Then, he grinned broadly, brandishing his sword offensively. Kurenai turned to Kakashi, her expression smug. I don't know how well you taught that boy, Kakashi-san, or even what you taught him, but he can't beat Kiba. No, Sakura whispered, having woken 2 minutes before, eyes glued to the battle before her. This isn't the limit. Naruto can do much more. Kurenai didn't look convinced and Kakashi refrained from commenting, but Hinata was silently agreeing with her fellow kunoichi. There was no way Naruto would lose this close to becoming Chunin. She caught Sakura's tiny grin out of the corner of her eye as her blonde crush spoke. Soten en Ace, Naruto commanded, eyes glued to his opponent's, Hyarinmaru. Oh no you don't! One Kiba cried as the two of them bounded forward on all fours. They spun, creating 2 vortexes that rushed forth side by side. Gutsuga. Fang over Fang. Kakashi palmed his face as Naruto dashed in their direction, sword trailing by his leg. He jumped as the collision became imminent, twisting to get between the 2 winding tornadoes. Kakashi's eye almost widened as the blonde managed to dodge the attacks completely, if only by a hair. As Naruto landed, Kakashi noticed something else. One of the vortexes suddenly twisted off course, colliding with the ground painfully. Dust rose and as it cleared, a Kiba could be seen covered up to the neck in ice and wrapped in a chain. The chain reached all the way over to Naruto, connecting with the hilt of his sword. A crescent-shaped blade was attached to the other end of the string of metal links, stabbed into the ground. The second swirl of air and chakra dissipated and a second Kiba landed, staring at the frozen mass that encompassed his comrade. He growled, Akamaru? Calmly, Naruto walked over to his captive, staring down at the dog-turned-boy impassively. Bending down, he pulled the crescent blade from the tiled floor, dropping it immediately afterwards. He reared his fist back, punching the ice with all of his strength. It shattered under his power, the transformation dropping to reveal Kiba's puppy. Akamaru! Kiba cried. Naruto turned at the sound of his voice, the crescent and chain retracting into Hyarinmaru's hilt. The sword looked as if nothing had happened. You! Kiba snarled. He ran forward again, once more transforming into a spinning vortex as he shouted, Tsuga! Piercing Fang. Naruto leapt over the attack, turning around in midair as he brought his sword up. Both hands tightened over the hilt, the blue wrappings rubbing comfortably against his palm. With a jerk of movement, he began his downward swing. An azure dragon jolted forth from the blade's majestic arc, its red eyes gleaming. Rain over the frozen sky, Hinata muttered as Kurenai's mouth dropped open in surprise. The dragon roared as it soared for its target, carving a winding path through the air of the arena. Kiba stopped spinning and turned around, shock etched onto his face as the beast charged towards him. Kiba-kun! Kurenai called in alarm, her composure regained. Her voice seemed to snap the Inuzuka boy out of his stupor, and he dodged at the last second, watching as the dragon collided with the tiled floor. A large ice spike remained protruding from the ground, its edges jagged and sharp. cold steel pressed up against Kiba's neck. Naruto stood in front of him, Hyarinmura poised threateningly against his opponent's jugular vein. The blonde's eyes were as icebergs floating in the frosted sea. You lose. Kiba jerked forward, clutching at his stomach where Naruto had punched him as his knees fell from under him. Blackness intruded upon his vision, and with a heavy thump, Kiba collapsed to the ground unconscious. Naruto swung his sword over his shoulder, placing it in the sheath that had just reappeared as if from nowhere. Hate knelt down, checking on the Inuzuka boy. He stood a second later, raising his hand in the blonde's direction as he said, in the loudest voice he could muster, "Winner, Uzumaki Naruto. Hyuga Hinata vs. Hyuga Niji." "I never thought I'd be facing you," Niji said, a cold grin on his lips. "Hinata-sama?" "Niji Nizan," Hinata whispered. "Before we begin, I'd like to thank you, Hinata-sama," Niji's mouth twisted into an angry snarl, "for causing my father's death." "And no. I..." Still stuttering, Niji scoffed. "I can sense your inferiority complex from here. I bet you didn't even want to enter this exam. You just did so because your teammates wanted to." "No," Hinata interrupted. "I entered this exam to change myself." Niji's eyes narrowed. "You really are a spoiled brat of the main house, aren't you? Don't you understand? People cannot change. A loser like you will always be a loser." "Shut up." Niji's hateful eyes flickered to Naruto, the origin of the angry command. "You and your destiny crap aren't worth shit. Hinata-san, kick that jerk into next week." Hinata moved into a stance. Niji caught it out of the corner of his eye and smirked, mimicking her. "Begin." In an instant, they were at each other's throats. The 10-foot distance that separated them closed almost like magic, and, in a flash, they were mere inches apart. Niji ducked under Hinata's first strike, stepping inside her guard and aiming his own attack at her heart. Hinata quickly dodged to the side, going against the traditional juken motions by throwing a roundhouse kick into Niji's stomach. Niji used his momentum to duck under her kick, tucking his body into a ball as he rolled out of the way. Faster than most could follow, he was on his feet again, flying towards Hinata with as much speed as he possessed. Hinata moved to the side of his first glowing hand, but wasn't fast enough to dodge the follow-up attack of Niji's left hand. Her shoulder burning in pain, Hinata stumbled backwards, clutching at where her cousin had made contact. "Come on, princess," a voice whispered in her ear. She looked over her shoulder as the world halted, come eye to eye with a majestic phoenix, its feathers shimmering from golden to crimson with every move. Beady bronze eyes looked down a plum-colored beak at her. Hinata couldn't speak. "Are you going to let this boy do this to you?" Who are? Hinata stuttered, eyes wide. "You know my name, Hinata-chan," the phoenix whispered, landing on the girl's shoulder and rubbing its head against her cheek affectionately. An inexplicable warmth worked its way through her body, sending a pleasurable shiver from her head to her toes. "You've always known my name." The phoenix let out a loud trill, its voice and the almost musical notes contained within echoing as it spread its wings. "Now speak it. Speak my name and show the world just how strong you are." The world jerked to a start. Hinata reached her hand forwards, grasping at air as her eyes narrowed in determination. "Hajik, Tobium." Prongs of red energy swirled in the air and coalesced into an oblong shape, then formed a sword in Hinata's palm as Niji dashed towards her again, hands coated with chakra. With a wild, uncharacteristic scream, Hinata pointed the tip of her new blade at her cousin. A ball of pink energy shot forward, but Niji dodged around it, moved inside her guard, and knocked the weapon from her grasp. It clattered to the ground uselessly. "You are within my field of hack." Hinata's head whipped around just in time to see the angry, piercing expression on her cousin's face, followed quickly by Niji's blazing hands. The fingers struck home and she felt two of her tenketsu close. 2 palms. A swarm of hands too fast for her to catch the individual motions struck her, leaving 4 spots on her body very sore. 4 palms. Another swarm came and the number of hits her body took quadrupled. 8 palms. 16 palms. A third swarm rained down on her, stealing her strength and chakra from her. 32 palms. The last swarm came faster than the rest, some striking spots on her body that were already sore from previous hits. 64 palms. The final strike, the 65th palm, came at her, throwing her back a few feet where she collapsed to the ground. "This is the difference in talent that will never change," Niji said acidly. "This is the destiny that you cannot alter." Hinata stood shakily, its end not over. "Just give up," Niji told her. Go back to being the weakling of the main branch. Go back to suffering at the fate of our family's differences. You say you can see everything, Hinata stuttered weakly. But I think you're overlooking something. The one suffering from the differences in our family is you. In a flash, several people had moved to stand between the two Hyuga. Several jonin, including Hate, surrounded the white-eyed boy, poised to intercept if he chose to move further and kill his cousin. Naruto, to the surprise of the adults standing with him, had his blade set and ready to slit Niji's throat, his eyes icy. Soten and Ace, Naruto whispered coldly as a pressure seemed to press down on the entire room, Hirin. That's enough, Naruto-kun, Kakashi stated calmly, his tone firm and brooking no argument. The pressure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared and Naruto turned his head, staring at his Jonin sensei with his frigid eyes. A pained cough dragged Naruto's attention onto the Hyuga heiress, Hinata, as she fell backwards and, in an instant, he was by her side. Kakashi had to blink, wondering if the boy hadn't mastered some sort of speed-related jutsu. Did I? Hinata coughed violently, small amounts of blood mixing with her saliva. Her sword had become a katana. Her eyes were closed. Did I do good, Naruto-kun? Yeah, Naruto whispered soothingly, even knowing that she couldn't hear him. She'd lost consciousness barely a second after asking. You did great. Blood trickled from her mouth, alarming Naruto greatly. The only explanation was internal bleeding, and considering the numerous internal injuries she had to be suffering from, she might not make it all the way to the hospital. He swore mentally, knowing there was nothing he could do. I wouldn't be so hasty, child, a soft voice said. Naruto's gaze jerked to his right, Hirimura's heavy snout hovering over his shoulder as the dragon took in Hinata's injured form. To Naruto's shock, the world had stopped and not a soul was moving or even breathing. I will provide and manipulate the energy. All you have to do is move your hand where I tell you. Naruto nodded quickly, desperate to save the girl so like himself. Instantly, the world started up again as Hirimura disappeared. No more than a second later, Naruto was flooded with a powerful feeling and his body felt lighter than air. Now, Hirimura's voice whispered softly, unzip her jacket and take it off. The first place we must pay attention to is her heart. Nodding almost imperceptibly, Naruto dutifully unzipped the girl's heavy jacket and brushed the flaps aside. He blushed slightly at the sight of her feminine assets, restrained only by a tight black shirt, but knocked the thought away as he rested his palm, glowing white, against her sternum. What are you doing? Kurenai demanded from him hotly, but he ignored her, moving his hand further down to rest on her bruised stomach at Hirimura's command. Strangely enough, he could, and this confused him, feel the damaged capillaries and taut smooth muscles heal under his fingers. Once more, he moved his hand, delicately peeling her jacket off so as to reach her arms. He watched in amazement as the purpling flesh slowly returned to its natural cream color under his touch, until no sign of the bruises remained. The glow dissipated. Turning his head slightly, Naruto leveled a glare at Niji as exhaustion slowly set in, growling out, in the finals, you're going down. Barely a second later, he collapsed backwards, unconscious and snoring. Sighing in exasperation, Kakashi hefted his student onto his shoulder as medics carried away the Hyuga girl. Naruto-kun, your flames of youth are most passionate, Madogai said seriously, more to himself than anyone else. Yoshi! If Hinata-san makes a full recovery, I will run around Konoha on my hands 500 times. And if I can't do that, I'll scale the Hokage monument with nothing but my teeth. And if I can't do that, I'll do 100,000 push-ups using only my right index finger. Yoshi! Gai-sensei! Rock Lee cried excitedly. Your youthful passions are overflowing. Yoshi! The ninth match was Gaara versus Rock Lee. Lee's eyes blazed. Yada! It is finally my turn. Lee put up a good fight and was able to land a few good hits on Gaara, but Gaara was just too strong. In the end, Lee had shown that he could open the celestial gates and the power they held. But it wasn't any match for Gaara's sand, which crushed the bones in Lee's left arm and leg. He was carried off on a stretcher, the medic saying he wouldn't be able to be a shinobi ever again. The last match was Akimichi Chuji versus Dosuke Kyuta. Chuji lost pretty quickly. He simply couldn't win against Dosa's sound techniques. Even with his Baiken no Jutsu and his meat tank, he wasn't able to win against the Otonin. Now then, Sandaime stood in front of the remaining examinees. Each of you will draw a piece of paper from the box Enko-san is holding. This will decide who faces who in the finals. Kakashi drew one for his sleeping student and one for his hospitalized student, Naruto, 1. Sasuke 4. Dosu 8. Shikamaru 9. Temari 7. Kankuro 5. Gaara 3. Niji 2. Shino 6. Ibiki showed them a chart. It depicted the opponents for the finals. Match 1, Uzumaki Naruto vs Hyuga Niji. Match 2, Sabaka no Gaara vs Uchiha Sasuke. Match 3, Kankuro vs Abirame Shino. Match 4, Dosa Kinyuda vs Tamari. Match 5, Match 4 Victor vs Naresh Shikamaru. When Naruto awoke, something fuzzy was tickling his nose and his arms were thrown over something large and wide. Blearily, he opened his eyes to see the gravity-defying white hair of his Jonin sensei and the cobblestone streets of his home village, Konoha no Sato. He blinked, mumbling weakly, "Huh?" "Oh, Naruto-kun," Kakashi glanced back at him, adjusting the boy's position on his back. "You're awake. Good." Naruto answered lamely. "What happened?" "I didn't know you could forget that kind of thing," Kakashi said calmly, his tone monotonous. "After all, several people are wondering how you managed to heal such severe injuries when you yourself know nothing about medical ninjutsu." Kurenai-san was livid. "Don't know," Naruto muttered, resting his pounding head against Kakashi's shoulder. "Hyarinmaru told me what to do." "Hyarinmaru?" Kakashi posed, hiding his shock. "Your sword told you how to heal someone?" "Not just a sword," Naruto loosed a jaw-cracking yawn. "He's a dragon, too. Tenten-san said something about sealed in a sword." "Oh?" Kakashi asked. "And this sword, this dragon, Hyarinmaru, where did you get him? How long have you had him?" "Forever," Naruto said tiredly. "According to him, he's been with me forever. He's only been a sword since the second part of the exam." Kakashi frowned. He was getting mixed signals. "Are you sure he's safe, Naruto-kun? Are you sure he's a dragon? Are you sure he's not?" Kakashi silently braced himself for the question. "The Kyuubi?" "No, he's dragon all right," the blonde mumbled. "Seen him and everything. Said something about being my sword and shield. Whatever that means." Kakashi remained silent as Naruto's apartment came into view, unsure of how to take this new information. It was hard to trust his student when it came to this matter, simply because the demon fox sealed in the boy's belly was very strong and old. It had undoubtedly picked up quite a few tricks and methods of deception. He wanted to trust Naruto. He wanted to trust that his student knew what he was talking about, and that everything was actually okay. It was just very hard to believe that the boy had some sort of guardian dragon now, one that could actually be used as a weapon. It was like something out of a fairy tale. Ninja didn't believe in fairy tales. Ninja believed in cold hard facts, undeniable truths, and what they could gather using their own senses. Good ninja even questioned the possible falsehood of these things. After all, Genjutsu was the art of illusion and sensory deception. Hatake Kakashi was a good ninja. There weren't many alternative possibilities, though, and that alarmed Kakashi. Naruto had confirmed, almost beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Kyuubi was not involved at all. Sasuke was given the curse mark by Orochimaru during the second exam. The only possibility that fit in the realm of reality, besides the one that Naruto was telling the truth, was that Orochimaru had given Naruto the sword. That was an even more absurd likelihood, simply for the fact of who Naruto was. Beyond the fact that Naruto was the child with the nine-tailed fox sealed inside him, he was also the son of the Yondaime Hokage, the one person Orochimaru hated above all else. The Hibi Sannin would not take an interest in the child of his most hated enemy, the man who had stolen the position he had wanted above everything. That meant that Naruto wasn't lying, he was telling the truth. It wasn't the Kyuubi manipulating him either, because the demon fox lacked any form of control over the world outside of the seal that bound him. What it all boiled down to was that Hyarinmaru really was a dragon and a sword. The question was the how. The existence and dual identity of Hyarinmaru was new and unprecedented. There had never before been a sword capable of sentient thought, nor had there ever been a dragon that could become a sword, mostly because there also weren't any dragons. What Naruto had was revolutionary. Kakashi knew, though, that revolutionary abilities like this were usually guarded and bred into clans by the Council of Fire. For now, he would keep his mouth shut. If word got to the council that Naruto possessed some kind of bloodline, they would probably run an insurmountable number of tests on his blonde student, regardless of what harm they did to the boy. Because of the demon fox's presence inside him, Naruto was nothing more than a slab of meat to the old men and women of the council. So long as he drew breath, Kakashi wouldn't let them treat his sensei's legacy in such a manner. He owed a great deal to the fourth Hokage, and he wasn't about to let such a thing happen to the only child of his father figure. If for no other reason, he was going to protect Naruto. Gently shifting his cargo, he eased open the blonde's apartment door, nearly wincing as the hinges squeaked. Naruto was out cold, however, and didn't even stir at the obnoxious noise. He silently breathed a sigh of relief, slipping his sandals off as he walked into the small flat. His eyes adjusted immediately to the darkness within as he looked around. It took him a minute, but he found what he was looking for and opened the door to the boy's bedroom. Thankfully, it didn't squeak or creak even the tiniest bit as he eased it from its closed state. Gently, he set the blonde down on the futon unrolled in the center of the room. He slowly pulled the blonde's sandals off, setting them up against the wall next to the door. He reached to take the sword off of his student's back, but a cold chill ran down his spine as his fingers neared the hilt, and he immediately thought better of it. He pulled the covers up, tucking them under boy's chin. A sudden feeling of guilt and longing struck him and he backed up, gazing at Naruto sadly as he quietly closed the door. He deftly maneuvered his way through the darkness, locking the front door as he left. With one last backward glance, he vanished in a swirl of leaves. Naruto rubbed his eyes, slowly standing up. His sandals sunk in the snow, but no feeling of coldness reached him as the white fuzz buried his toes. He looked around, only to discover he had once more returned to the world of Hyarimuru. He blinked, wondering just why he was back. "You're here," the dragon's voice said calmly, the beast swerving its long body around him. It twisted till it was looking him in the eyes, its lower body coiled around his feet and legs. "Tell me, child, do you know why you're here?" "No," Naruto started, shaking his head. His tongue froze mid-motion as images flashed through his mind and in front of his eyes, reminding him of what he'd done. His glowing white hand resting on Hinata's chest, Hyarimura hovering over his shoulder, his palm gliding over her smooth arms, and falling back into unconsciousness. That energy, Naruto began slowly, his mind working a mile a minute. What was it? It wasn't chakra. Good, the dragon cooed, its eyes narrowing slightly. You've started to become more observant. You've started to behave more like a dragon. Like a shinobi. Hyarimura moved closer, until its snout was mere inches from his face. The two thin, long, fleshy feelers beneath its nostrils wavered in a non-existent wind as it spoke. As you well know, chakra is made of physical and spiritually energy perfectly blended, but did you know that you could separate those energies and use them individually? Naruto's eyes widened as he slowly shook his head. Hyarimura continued. Chi, or ki, is the body's physical energy, and if used properly, can be used to supplement limbs and such. Because of its nature, chi is useful only for augmentation of physical movements. Chi cannot be used for direct attack. Riryoku, however, or spirit energy, is what allows chakra to be channeled for jutsu. By itself, Riryoku has several uses that can be helpful to the life of a shinobi. The easiest example was how you healed that girl of such life-threatening injuries. Beyond that, Riryoku can be used to form attacks and the like with which you can defeat your enemies. When it is not mixed into chakra, Riryoku is incapable of molding the elements. I get what you're saying, Hyarimuru, Naruto started quietly, a confused gleam in his gaze, but what's the point of telling me? I don't know how to manipulate Riryoku, so how's it going to help me? Hyarimuru grinned, baring his large, sharp teeth. Quite simple, actually. You may not know how, but that does not mean you are incapable of learning. Naruto's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates, a ghost of a grin stretching at his lips. You mean? The dragon's grin widened. Tomorrow, you will seek out that white-haired teacher of yours and have him teach you during the afternoons. In the mornings, from dawn's first light till the sun has reached its midday zenith, I will be teaching you to mold and use your Riryoku as a weapon. Really? Naruto asked excitedly, his eyes sparkling as the dragon nodded. He thrust his arms into the air, his own grin threatening to split his face. Yada. This is going to be so cool. Wait. He refocused back onto the dragon still coiled around his lower body. Does this stuff require hand seals? As Hyarimura shook his head, Naruto leapt into the air, whooping loudly. He laughed excitedly. All right. I'm gonna be an awesome ninja. Ha! Take that, Sasuke. You can't copy my jutsu, because they don't use hand seals. Naruto grunted as the dragon knocked him to the ground with its tail, hitting the earth face first and making an imprint in the snow. The dragon sighed, more to himself than anything. Good grief. I don't think I could have taken much more of that. As the blonde stood, rubbing his head, the dragon leveled a glare at him. You must learn to contain your excitement, or else nothing I teach you will help. Shinobi are silent and cunning. You are beginning to understand and apply this concept, but you must control such loud and annoying impulses. Naruto nodded, thoroughly cowed. Hyarimura cooed. Good. Now. The dragon swiveled away, leaving Naruto to stand alone as it faced him. Your training begins immediately. It had taken him a while and more than a little bit of asking and eavesdropping, but Naruto had finally come upon the information he'd been looking for. When he'd set out in the morning, he hadn't figured it'd be so hard to find two very special people amongst the shinobi populace. He figured it wouldn't have taken him more than a half an hour tops. Unfortunately, it had wound up taking him nearly 3 hours just to come across the information he'd been seeking. He probably would have had better luck just sending clones to search the village. He probably would have cut the time it took for him to search in half. All he'd had to do was listen to his instincts. If he had listened to what his mind was telling him to do instead of what he figured Sakura would tell him to do, he would have accomplished his set goal much earlier. Things would have been much easier on him, and he would have finished his task at 8 o'clock instead of the current time, 10:46. Finally, after searching for the location of Hinata and Sasuke, Naruto walked through the glass doors of the hospital. He walked up to the receptionist's desk, asking for the room numbers belonging to the two people he wanted to visit. The reception he got wasn't what he was expecting. "What?" he demanded angrily. "What do you mean? Why not?" "I'm sorry," she told him, only sounding half apologetic, "but Higa-sama is still unconscious and Sasuke-sama has been forbidden from having any visitors at all." "Fine. I can't visit Sasuke-team. At least let me visit," his voice softened. "At least let me visit Hinata-chan." The nurse blinked, then sighed. "Look, kid, I'd like to let you see her, but I'm not allowed." "Why not?" Naruto demanded vehemently. "Why can't I visit Hinata-chan?" The nurse opened her mouth to reply, but Naruto didn't give her the chance. "Are you one of those people? The kind that spits at my feet when my back's turned? The kind that would drive a wooden stake through my heart just to see if I bleed?" He slammed his fists down on the desk, his voice loud. "Well, I'm not going to sit here and take this. I'm going to find Hinata-chan even if I have to spend the whole day just looking for." "Naruto-kun," a voice called calmly, "this is a hospital. You're supposed to be quiet." "Oh." Naruto spun around, instantly brightening. "Kakashi-sensei. Listen, there's something I wanted to ask you." Ma, Kakashi held up a hand, stopping whatever Naruto had been about to say. "I know what you're going to ask and I'm sorry, but I can't train you." Naruto froze, his eyes wide and a disappointed frown on his face, his lips parted in mid-word. Kakashi recognized the symptoms immediately and knew that, were he not as old as he was, Naruto would be tearing up right now and ready to pout. He sighed. "Look, Naruto-kun," Kakashi started, dreading the upcoming conversation, "were things so easy, I'd love to spend the next month training you. Unfortunately, not only am I completely inept at Kenjutsu, I have to prepare Sasuke for his match against Gaara." "You're training Sasuke-team?" Naruto asked, his voice suddenly frigid. "Why the hell can't you train me?" "I'd love to, Naruto-kun," Kakashi stated, trying to placate the blonde. "Now that you have such a powerful ice-type ability, I could show you some really awesome Suiton jutsu. The only problem is your opponent is a Calm Leaf ninja. Win or lose, nobody's dying." Kakashi sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Gaara, though, is totally unstable. I have to prepare Sasuke for a fight against that maniac and, even then, I'm not sure he'd win. You, on the other hand, would be a perfect matchup." "Why?" Naruto asked, honestly curious. Kakashi thought he could take down Gaara? "Hyarinmaru," Kakashi stated, as if that explained everything. "Since he is a water and ice type ability, he'll make it much harder on Gaara to manipulate his sand. That would give you an amazing advantage and I have very few doubts that you'd fail to capitalize on it." "Then why can't you?" Naruto began, his voice something of a whine. "Look, Naruto-kun," Kakashi interrupted, holding out a scroll. "This is a jutsu scroll. On it is Mizubunshin no Jutsu. I've found you an instructor to be my replacement, and he's going to teach you chakra control. Whenever he feels you've gained enough control, he'll give you another, much more powerful Suiton jutsu scroll." Naruto nodded, his eyes wide. It wasn't exactly the training he'd been looking for, but considering the options Kakashi had left him with, Hyarinmaru was urging him to take the offer. His control sucked horribly, he knew that, and it had become much worse after Orochimaru had sealed off the demon fox. Yet, he was stronger because of Orochimaru's little trick. Had the Snake Seni not blocked him off from the Kyuubi, he doubted he would have found Hyarinmaru any time soon. If there was one thing good to come of that meeting, Hyarinmaru was it. "Kakashi-san," Naruto looked towards the voice, only to find a man he easily recognized. A bit of dread filled him as he realized just who Kakashi's replacement was going to be. "Ah, Ebisu-san," Kakashi nodded. "I was just explaining things to Naruto. Listen, did you get those scrolls?" Hi, Ebisu nodded, adjusting his sunglasses slightly. As per your instructions, I'll give him one Suetun scroll whenever I feel he has enough control to perform the jutsu inside effectively. He's going to teach me? Naruto asked numbly, disbelief tainting his voice. The closet pervert? Oh. Kakashi smiled at him. So you know each other? This makes things easier. Know each other? Naruto echoed hollowly. I beat this guy in 5 seconds, with 2 jutsu. Really? Kakashi asked, feigning interest. Ebisu was the only one, besides perhaps himself, Jiraiya of the Sannin, and the Sandaime Hokage, that could properly teach Naruto. Since Ebisu was the only one available, it had to be Ebisu that taught Naruto. Ah! Ebisu seemed to teleport next to Naruto, clasping his hand over the boy's mouth. He's just kidding, right, Naruto-kun? Naruto glared. I may not be a great fighter, the man hissed at his blonde captive, but I'm an elite tutor. Teaching is my specialty. I can teach you things that'd make Sasuke-san's head spin. Naruto's eyes seemed to widen, then he nodded enthusiastically. Ebisu smiled in a disarming way. We'll be fine, Kakashi-san. See you later. In a swirl of leaves, Ebisu and Naruto disappeared, leaving Kakashi to blink at their strange antics. Shrugging, he pulled out his little orange book and headed towards Sasuke's room. Naruto couldn't help but stare. Steam rose into the air as tiny wisps of vapor, slowly disappearing into the atmosphere. Water sloshed gently against rocks that contained it, but not one drop escaped the confines of the natural pool. Even several feet away, Naruto could feel the heat radiating from the pond. Despite the inviting atmosphere, Naruto had to wonder why he was there. He was supposed to be training, wasn't he? That had been the impression he'd gotten when Ebisu had promised to teach him things that would wow even Sasuke. And the first thing the elite teacher had done was make him read Kakashi's scroll. So why were they here, standing in front of a hot spring, an onsen, next to a wall? A wall behind which he could hear many giggling girls as they bathed away their daily worries? Why? Naruto asked, confused. Why are we here? The first thing we're going to do is test you, Naruto-kun, Ebisu told him. Since you are learning Suetun Jutsu, you are going to need a source of water. What I want you to do, Naruto-kun, is produce exactly 5 Mizubunshin. You have 2 tries. Nodding, Naruto stepped next to the hot spring and focused his chakra, his hands in a seal. He cried, Mizubunshin no Jutsu. Around him, 7 water clones sprung into existence, each an identical copy of the original. Frowning, he dispersed them all, watching as they splashed back into water and made several puddles on the ground. Focusing again, he added less chakra than the first time, Mizubunshin no Jutsu. 2 water clones appeared this time, Naruto's frustrated frown growing as he realized just how horrible his chakra control had to be. As his 2 doppelgangers splashed to the ground, Ebisu walked towards him. Since it seems that your control is severely lacking, Ebisu said in a lecturing tone, we'll have to rectify the problem. What you're going to be doing, Naruto-kun, is walking on water. Naruto stared at him for a second, momentarily speechless. What? Kakashi-san has told me that you already know the tree climbing exercise, Ebisu stated, proudly walking out onto the hot spring. This is the next step up. Try it for yourself. Tentatively, with Hyarinmaru hissing instructions into his ear, Naruto channeled chakra to his feet and walked out onto the surface of the heated pond only to plummet straight to the bottom. Yowling painfully, Naruto jumped from the pool faster than Ebisu could see and landed straight up on the ground. As he got over the burning sensation on his flesh, he set his sword down, mumbling an apology to the dragon for letting that happen. Steel and water didn't mix very well and, though Naruto was aware that Hyarinmaru was no ordinary blade, he didn't want to risk letting his precious weapon rust. Taking off his orange jacket, Naruto channeled chakra again and took a slow step out onto the surface. It stayed and he smiled, confidently putting his other foot forward as he began to walk atop the water. On that second step, however, he once more fell straight into the water. Screaming in pain as the water burned him, he leapt up from it and landed once more on dry land. He hissed as the cool air rubbed roughly against his sensitive skin, waiting for it to turn back to its pale pink. It only took a few seconds, but during that time, Hyarinmaru took the opportunity to chastise him for being so hasty. Take it slowly, the dragon told him. Speed will earn you nothing in the end. Patience is the driving force behind success. Remember, Naruto, think like a dragon. Calming his frustration, Naruto focused his chakra once again and stepped out onto the water. His feet held as he walked steadily towards his temporary tutor, confident that he had this new skill down. Barely a second later, he fell into the hot water again, crying his anger and pain to the sky. Shaking his head in amusement, Ebisu looked past the boy at the fence opposite their section. His eyes widened. There was an old man with long white hair staring through a small hole in the fence, giggling like a schoolgirl. Ebisu fixed his glasses, scowling. I don't know who you are, he said, quietly at first, but I will not allow such shameful and dishonorable behavior. Ebisu rushed forward, his gaze stony as he focused on the indecent man in front of him. He glared at the pervert who simply ignored him and favored giggling, raising his fist to teach the man a lesson. There was a poof of smoke, and before he could react, a long tongue shot out and hit him, knocking him away. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. Be quiet, the older man said sternly, perched atop a large toad. You don't want me to get caught, do you? Naruto stared for a second, then felt anger bubbling up inside his chest. You idiot. Now what am I supposed to do? He threw his hands up in exasperation. It was bad enough that the snake freak messed up my chakra with some sealing jutsu, but you had to come along and knock out my instructor. Snake freak? The old man echoed curiously. What do you mean? Where did he hit you? Some guy in the second exam, Naruto sighed. He did this weird thing with his fingers, then hit me in the stomach. I see, the old man said pensively, rubbing his chin. Lift your shirt and channel some chakra. I think I have a solution. Whatever, Naruto mumbled, lifting his shirt as the man's fingers began to glow. He was hit by surprise, then the old man's fingers, when the 5 digits slammed into his stomach. Gojo Kane! The old man called. After a second, he pulled his hand back to look at his work. The 5-pronged seal that had overlapped the original seal faded away into nothingness. There. Now try the water walking skill. Listening to the old man, Naruto took a delicate step onto the water. When it held, he took another step, then another, and he didn't fall in. Confident from his success, he walked at a faster speed until he was running around the small spring. He nearly yelled excitedly when he didn't fall in at all. The old man started to walk away, thinking he would slip past the boy's notice. He had no such luck as Naruto shouted, Hey, don't think you're off the hook. This guy was supposed to be my teacher. Now you're going to have to fill that role. No way, the old man yelled back. I, Jiraiya the Gamma Sennin, don't have time to babysit a brat like you. Besides, you already learned what he was teaching you. Nah, Naruto called back, forming a hand seal. 5 Mizu Bunshin stood around him. He was supposed to teach me some really cool Suiton jutsu whenever my control was good enough. Fine, Jiraiya said angrily. You want a Suiton jutsu? Suiton, Suryuden. A dragon rose up from the hot spring behind Naruto, who panicked as it leered at him. He rushed to the shore, unsheathing his sword as the water dragon barreled towards him. He stabbed his sword forwards, into the dragon's mouth as he cried, Soten en Ace, Hyarinru. Instantly, before Jiraiya's surprised eyes, the dragon of water froze into a solid mass. Naruto twisted his sword and the dragon cracked and splintered before it shattered into thousands of pieces. With flourish, Naruto sheathed his sword. When he had used the Suryuden, Jiraiya hadn't intended to harm the boy, far from it. The jutsu had only been pumped with enough chakra to soak the blonde and knock him off his feet. He didn't think the kid could counter it, or that if he could, he would be too shocked to do so in time. The moment he'd seen the boy, Jiraiya knew who he was. It was hard not to. He would have had to be blind not to recognize the kid with the 9 tails stuck in his stomach. He would have had to be blind not to recognize his prized student's only child. The boy had spiky blonde hair and blue eyes. No matter who you were, if you were from Konoha, you would recognize those traits. At first glance, Jiraiya had considered training the boy, as he had the kid's father. He decided against it in the end. It would bring back too many happy memories that would just end up making him sad and depressed. Even now, nearly 13 years after the Yandame's death, it was still an open and sore wound. Any part of him that had wanted to train the boy had died as soon as the blonde had used Mizu Bunshin and told him he was learning Suiton. Learning Suiton jutsu meant that the kid's chakra had an affinity for water. The problem with that is that Jiraiya's didn't, so he couldn't teach him as much about Suiton as Sarutobi. But now the dragon had turned to ice after being struck by Naruto's sword. To turn something to ice, you needed both a water and wind affinity in your chakra. The sword just seemed to be a tool, a chakra blade used to cast techniques without hand seals and at a short distance. Jiraiya grinned. This kid was pretty interesting. Okay, kid, he said, a cocky grin on his lips, I think I'll train you after all. You will? Naruto asked excitedly, eyes shining with hope. Yeah, he said, crossing his arms. After all, as one of the Sannin, I know more about Suiton than anyone in this village, save the Hokage. You do? Naruto's face split into a large grin and Jiraiya immediately knew he had a disciple in the arts of ninjutsu. Yeah, he said confidently. Now come on. Let's take this to a more appropriate place, one with lots more water. Secretly, to himself, Jiraiya smirked. Hook, line, sinker. Come on, Ero-sennin. Jiraiya almost froze at the nickname, watching as Naruto ran down the road. This brat, he might be more trouble than he was worth. The sound of rushing water flowed past his senses, the smell of the liquid permeating his nostrils. The grass, taller than normal, tickled his bare toes incessantly. The wind blew gently, tousling his spiky hair. He grinned, excitement flowing through him. They had traveled to a river, one that Naruto hadn't even known existed. It was atop a waterfall that emptied into a pond that girls seemed to like to swim in, so Naruto could guess why Jiraiya had chosen this particular river. Still, the old man was going to teach him, so he wasn't going to complain. Right. Jiraiya clapped his hands together. I've already showed you the hand seals, so let's see how good you are at Suryuden. On. Naruto nodded, flashing through hand signs numbering in the dozens. He stopped on Bird, watching as the river churned unnaturally. A beast head began to form, sucking the water from its surroundings. Suetun, Suryuden no Jutsu. A winding dragon leapt from the water, twisting and turning in the air before it crashed back into its source. The river returned to normal, as if nothing had even happened. Jiraiya nodded, satisfied. Good. Good. Now let's try it while you're walking on the river. Nodding, Naruto took a step out onto the water, standing atop it without trouble. The river around his feet rippled slightly, but showed no sign of letting him fall through. Slowly, he walked to the center, making sure that the current wouldn't push him downstream. With a great deal more concentration, he went through the hand seals again, calling, Suetun, Suryuden. Much more slowly than it initially had, the dragon of water formed in front of him, its gaping maw snarling. It jumped from the river surface towards an imaginary enemy standing a good distance away from the blonde, then sunk back into the water as it hit its non-existent target. All right, the elder man muttered. It had taken him longer the second time than it had the first. Again. Naruto went through the hand seals once more, much faster than the second time. The dragon rose for a third time, marginally faster than either the first or second attempt. With a silent roar, the dragon dove into the river again a great distance away. It collided with a loud splash, throwing water up and out several feet. Jiraiya couldn't help but marvel at the power the kid had, mentally whistling as the third dragon dissolved back to its base element. Even elite jonin from the Hidden Mist village could only manage one or two before the chakra consumption started to affect them. But Naruto had pulled off 3 without even breathing heavily. Good, Jiraiya nodded. Now we're ready to move on to the next thing I have to teach you, Kuchiyos no Jutsu. In a blur, Naruto was at Jiraiya's side, grinning eagerly. Clearing his throat, Jiraiya continued, his voice lecturing. For this technique, however, you're going to need more than your normal amount of chakra. You've felt your secondary chakra, right? That's what you're going to have to use. Naruto shook his head. Sorry, Ero-sennin, but I'm not going to use Fluffy's power. If I use it like you're suggesting, then I'll become dependent on it, and my own power will grow weak. I'm not going to call on Kyuubi's chakra. What? Jiraiya asked incredulously, his expression surprised. Who taught you that? It's ridiculous. Why have all that power locked away if you're not going to use it? Naruto's eyes grew cold. That is the way of the dragon, Ero-sennin. Rely on your own power and the power of your friends, get stronger through hard work, and take no shortcuts. Be wise both in life and in battle and use force only when necessary. That is the way of the dragon. It's the principle I've dedicated my life to. Good, child, Hyarin cooed, whispering in his ear. You are learning well what I have taught to you. This is the path you walk, the path of wisdom, the path of the protector. Do not let any sway you from its course. All right, Jiraiya sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. If you're that serious about it, I guess we can just use your normal chakra. If we can build it up high enough, you won't need the fox's chakra. Naruto nodded, his expression suddenly cheery again. Jiraiya scratched his head, wondering if the boy was bipolar. Shrugging, he bit his thumb and went through hand seals. Right. First, I'll show you how. He thrust his palm to the ground, several chains of kanji spreading over the rocks beneath his feet. There was a puff of smoke, and standing beneath Jiraiya was a large toad slightly taller than the man himself. In its mouth was a scroll, the toad's tongue unrolling to drop it on the ground. Write your name in blood, like those written before you, Jiraiya commanded as Naruto unraveled the scroll. The seals are boar, dog, bird, monkey, and ram. In order to summon, you must spread a little blood on the hand you used to sign your name on the scroll. The blonde looked over the names written in blood on the large scroll, recognizing only a few of them. Jiraiya's was easy to see, written in large and fancy penmanship. To the right were several unfamiliar names, each one older and more archaic than the last. To the left of the Gamma Senins, though, was a name that Naruto had memorized a long time ago, Namikaze Minato. It was the fourth Hokage. That was all the endorsement he needed. Naruto couldn't help the grin that split his face as he bit into his right thumb, going just deep enough to draw blood. Carefully, he signed his name on the scroll using that blood, then dabbed each of his fingers with it. He pressed the tips of the fingers on his right hand against the thick rice paper, knowing that they would leave an impression. Naruto rolled the scroll back up, watching as the toad pulled it back into its mouth and disappeared. Jiraiya fell back to the ground with a soft clatter, hands on his hips as he looked at the blonde boy expectantly. Nodding, the blonde bit his thumb and swiped it over his right palm, flashing through the hand seals required. Thrusting his hand down, spider-web chains of kanji spread from the point of contact. There was a puff of smoke, the wind blowing it away quickly. As it cleared, Jiraiya looked somewhat shocked, as Naruto appeared from within it, riding atop a toad as tall as himself. Jiraiya scratched his chin absent-mindedly, a giddy feeling rising up in his stomach. A grin stretched across his face as he began to giggle slightly, the prospect before him exciting him beyond belief. 13 years after his previous star student had died, he had found a new student, one nearly as capable as the fourth Hokage. This boy, a no-talent loser according to the academy records, had so much potential that he almost couldn't believe it. What seemed even more unbelievable was that no one had noticed. This blonde brat had the potential to surpass all of the Hokage to date, even his own father, the Yondaime. The amount of chakra his body held was staggering and he never seemed to tire, despite the strain that normal Jonin-level ninja would be suffering under identical conditions. What was more, the kid already had two affinities, ones that could be combined to create something much more powerful. He was also the perfect matchup against the Uchiha Sasuke Jiraiya had heard so much about. While the blonde's wind chakra would be weak against the Uchiha's fire, his water chakra would easily overcome Sasuke's affinity. By combining both, he got rid of the wind's weakness to fire and could turn whole battlefields to his advantage. The Gamma Sennin almost trembled in giddy anticipation. This kid really was interesting. All right, Jiraiya said, watching the toad disappear, that's enough for today. Go home and get a good night's rest. Meet me here tomorrow afternoon. Remember to eat some lunch. And with a puff of smoke, Jiraiya vanished. The sun rose over the easterly trees, painting the sky in brilliant tones of red, orange, yellow, and pink. The dark navy blue sky steadily turned to a delicate azure, puffy white clouds decorating it. The trill of morning birds lilted in the air, singing a serenade of peace to the world. Few were awake, save for those dedicated to their training, despite their questionable sanity. Guy-sensei! A voice called in the distance. Lee! Came the answer. Focus, Naruto told himself calmly, feeling the dragon's eyes on the back of his head. Focus the energy. Circulate it to your hand, gathering it within the palm and fingers. Let it grow. Pure energy spiraled through his body, flowing freely through his limbs. It rose through him, from his toes all the way to the roots of his hair. The feeling was invigorating and left him feeling invincible, as though nothing earthly could touch him. It was as if he was some higher being capable only of being defeated by the stars themselves. He breathed in and the universe was at his beck and call. As the energy rushed through his cells and molecules, he grasped for it, preparing to shape it for its purpose. It slipped from his fingers several times, gliding over his mental palms like sand over the desert. It would not be tamed, and Naruto began to feel the slight chill in the air as it took on a mind of its own. Concentrating, Naruto grabbed it, refusing to let go. It stuck this time, and he opened his shining eyes, calmly aiming his hand at a tree. With but a slight push, the energy gathered as he told it to in the palm of his hand. Tonelessly, he said, Heido no Senjusen, Sokatsui. A violent discharge was the only warning that Naruto had before the ball of blue power leapt from his hand, soaring at amazing speeds towards its target. The poor tree had no chance, and neither did the 6 trees beside it, or the dozen trees behind it. All 19 trees were incinerated by the blast, naught but ashes to remain. Wow, Naruto grinned, looking down at his normal fingers with excitement. That was amazing! And it was only number 33. Naruto grasped at the energy again, forming it in the tip of his right index finger, saying, Now for number 4. The power gathered again, arcing over his body and through his arm, converging at his fingertip. He continued to push it towards that one point, waiting for the right amount to have gathered. He waited as it festered and grew, his finger beginning to glow brightly. Finally, as the power reached an apex, he called, Heido no Yan Byakurai. A bolt of white lightning leapt from his finger, soaring outward at an amazing speed. It struck the tree he had been pointing at, blowing a wide hole straight through its large and thick trunk. Several trees behind, nearly a dozen by his count, suffered the same fate, creaking dangerously as their support faltered. With a crash, they all fell to the earth, never to bloom again. "Do you see, Naruto-kun?" Hyarinmura asked, locking gazes with him. "The power of Riryoku?" "Yeah," he said, decorating his voice, "it's awesome. You sure do know quite a bit about this kind of stuff, Hyarinmura. At this rate, I'll be Hokage before I know it." "Indeed," the dragon commented amusedly. It turned its head away. "That's enough practice for now. Let's move on. Have you finished your little project?" "I'm close," Naruto said, scratching his head sheepishly. "I've figured most of the stuff out, but I need to find a way to make it summon you. So far, it doesn't summon anything." "I must congratulate you," Hyarinmura said, his voice filled with paternal praise. "This idea was quite crafty and cunning. Many would call it a very fox-like idea. I say it is an idea worthy of a dragon." "Thanks," Naruto laughed happily. "I took one look at Erosenen's summoning scroll and decided to make one for you. Toads are nice and all, but they're just not suited for my abilities. So I'll just summon you. See, the way I figure, since it's a time-space jutsu, I can summon anything that doesn't fully exist in the realm of reality." Hyarinmura nodded. To come up with such a thing after seeing it only once is quite admirable. "I have no doubt that you will succeed." Somehow, Naruto could tell that the dragon was looking at him out of the corner of its eye. "When you do, I have quite an interesting skill to teach you." A shiver of anticipation traveled down Naruto's spine, raising tiny bumps all over his arms. He wasn't sure if the shiver of anticipation was one of eagerness, or if it was of an ominous origin. The latter seemed much more plausible because of the icy block that had suddenly lodged itself in his stomach. Hyarinmura rarely called something interesting. Considering how knowledgeable the dragon was, there wasn't much that it could claim was interesting. There were several things that it took an interest in, but it never used such a word to describe those things. He preferred to call it a healthy dose of curiosity. If it was a technique he was teaching Naruto, he always made it seem insignificant to him, but very important to the blonde boy. He used all sorts of words and phrases to entice him into learning, but interesting had never been one of them. If he was using it to describe something, that something had to be beyond cool. Naruto called Sasuke's fire jutsu cool. Hyarinmura scoffed at them, claiming that such skills were easily learned and acquired by anyone with an attention span. Naruto called Rock Lee's speed and taijutsu awesome. Hyarinmura chastised him for admiring the boy's abilities when he could be working towards acquiring them for himself. Naruto thought Kakashi was one of the best. Hyarinmura assured him that there were better. So for Hyarinmura to call something interesting, it had to be beyond powerful. It had to be even more powerful than the destruction spells the dragon was teaching him to use. It had to be stronger than Kakashi's signature move. Naruto shivered again. He was either really lucky or in deep shit. Naruto stood shakily, panting as sweat rolled down his cheeks and nose, his blue eyes drooping slightly. The water around him churned as yet another dragon dissolved into it, splashing the riverbanks harshly. He fought to stay atop the surface as the movement of the water body compromised his footing. Again came the command and Naruto obeyed. He flashed through the hand seals, stopping on Bird and watching as the water in front of him swirled and rose to form a dragon. It seemed to roar as it jumped forwards at an invisible target. It crashed back into the river, causing turbulence over the surface. He struggled to stay atop. After his success at summoning, Jiraiya had decided that it would be best to hammer out his skills in Suiton by making him practice till he dropped. Along with Suryuden, the old man had taught him Daibakafu no Jutsu and Suijin Hiki, and had him practice them alongside it. The old man was determined to make him a Suiton master before the Chunin exam finals. For the 3 weeks he'd been training under the elder shinobi, he'd become quite proficient in water-style techniques. Jiraiya wasn't the only one training him in jutsu. After Naruto had perfected several of the spells he'd been teaching the blonde, Hyarinmura had started to have Naruto recreate jutsu he'd seen before. Specifically, he had Naruto recreate techniques that Haku had used during their battle on the bridge. So far, he'd managed to teach himself Haku's Sensatsu Suisho, something he'd only caught a glimpse of during the fake Hunter Ninja's skirmish with Sasuke, and how to perform certain jutsu using one-handed seals. Unfortunately, while Hayaton wasn't something that only Haku could use, the Makyu Hayashi was a bloodline limit-related skill. He couldn't replicate it beyond forming the mirrors. That's not to say that training was all Naruto did. He had visited Hinata several times since the preliminaries, more often than not stopping by the Yamanaka shop to buy some flowers for her. He wouldn't admit it to anyone, but he took a secret pleasure in seeing the Hyuga princess blush every time he came in her room with a bouquet in his hands. He tried to visit Sasuke once, only to find that the Uchiha prodigy's bed was completely empty, as if no one had ever slept in it. He'd been confused for a second, wondering if maybe Orochimaru had stolen the boy in his sleep, before he'd taken a better look at the scene of the supposed crime. There was no sign of a struggle and no sign of more than one person being involved in his rival's escape. He'd nearly grinned. Sasuke had left on his own. "All right," Jiraiya called, halting his training as his fingers moved together almost on reflex. "That's enough. I'd say you've got this down pretty well. You've got 5 days until the finals. Take that time to rest." Nodding, Naruto staggered over to the riverbank, collapsing as soon as his feet hit dry land. His breath came out in short pants, his eyelids drooping as the exhaustion set in. Jiraiya chuckled slightly, amused that he'd finally found the boy's limits. "I'll be back in half an hour," he told the kid, kneeling next to the blonde's head. "If you're still lying here then, I'll take you home myself." In a puff of smoke, the man disappeared. Naruto sighed, rolling over onto his back to look up at the bright afternoon sky. He sighed again as his breathing began to even out, his body slowly regenerating the chakra he'd used up during his training. It had been intense, more so than any other training he'd ever done. "You have progressed well," a familiar voice told him, a smooth, reptilian body lying next to his. "You've even finished that project of yours. Most impressive." "I suppose," Naruto sighed again. "I just feel like there's something missing. Like there's something more I need to learn. Something more that can make me stronger." The dragon lifted its head to look at him, a serious gleam in its eyes. "I guess it's time, then." Naruto arched his eyebrow. "What? Time for what? What's it time for?" "You'd best rest up," the dragon evaded his question. "Come back here tomorrow and summon me. I'm going to teach you that technique I promised." Once more, the block of icy dread dropped into his stomach, churning the acid there uncomfortably. Yeah, he was in deep shit. The roar of rushing water pounded against his ears, the river splashing recklessly against the rocks as it headed for the waterfall. The long grass rose over the sides of his sandals, tickling the calloused pads of his toes. The tangy scent of the water stung his nostrils, the smell wafting from the roaring river. He stepped carefully, almost hesitantly, over the hard stones, gathering his wits and courage about him. He was stepping into the situation blind. He didn't know what was going to happen, but his gut feeling told him it wasn't something good. It was supposed to be a new technique, but something felt wrong about it. Slowly, he bit his thumb, wiping the thick blood over his left palm. With a methodical pace, he went through each seal at a snail's pace, making sure it was correct. First boar, then dog, then bird, then monkey, then ram. He thrust his palm down, spider-webbed chains of kanji spreading from the point of contact. There was a large puff of smoke as Naruto felt a bit of vertigo, shooting up into the air. His feet stood atop something hard yet soft, and smooth yet scaly, a sea of icy azure invading his vision. He felt his eyes widen to saucers as he realized the truth of the situation. He was standing atop a huge Hyarinmaru, one at least 100 times bigger than the one he knew. "So you managed," the voice was deeper, but it was still familiar. "I wonder, however, if you can manage the task I have set for you." "Task?" Naruto asked confusedly. "What's this task?" "As you know, by calling out the correct command along with my name, you can merge your power with mine," the dragon told him. "However, there is a level of power beyond that where you and I merge our powers much further. To accomplish this task, you must defeat me and claim my power for your own." "What?" Naruto shouted in alarm. "Defeat you? How?" "Don't worry, child," Hyarinra placated, chuckling amusedly, "this is not direct combat. All you must do is defeat one challenge I will set for you." "Challenge?" Naruto asked tentatively, slightly hesitant. He firmed his resolve from rubber to iron. "Okay. What's this challenge?" "You have 4 days left before your finals," the dragon said calmly. "To achieve the next level of power, you must stay atop me for the next 72 hours straight. Do you accept this challenge?" "Of course!" Naruto exclaimed, standing shakily. "This is only one step on the road to Hokage. If I can accomplish this, I'll be that much closer to my dream." "So be it," the dragon said solemnly. With a jerk, Hyarinra threw himself to the ground, writhing through the river like giant snake. Naruto let out a yelp as he nearly lost his footing, using chakra to grip tightly to the scales on the beast's back. Water rose up around him, soaking his clothes all the way down to his skin. The dragon jerked again and Naruto gripped its scales with all his strength, desperate not to fall off. His grasp loosened, but he refused to let go. Gravity tugged on him hard, pulling him as hard as it could. Another wave of vertigo filled him. "Gah!" Naruto cried, his fingers slipping slightly. I should have known better than to do something like this. Hyarinmura leapt off the ground, sprouting wings that had previously been invisible. Naruto's eyes widened. Oh, shit. Gaara walked quietly into the hospital room of Rock Lee, his bloodshot eyes staring intensely at the bleached white walls in front of him. He strode slowly, purposefully towards the bed containing the bandaged, spandex-wearing boy, his intent clear to anyone and anything capable of independent thought. His open right hand shot outwards as his left jumped upwards, clenching at his head. Sand burst from his gourd, his breathing deep as it crept along the floors with a life of its own. It swirled slowly around Lee's bed, steadily creeping up onto the unconscious boy, attempting to cocoon him in a deadly coffin. Suddenly, without warning, a fist came out of nowhere and collided solidly with his cheek, sending him sprawling backwards and to the floor. As the shock of being hit slowly wore off, Gaara straightened up, a small bit of his armor of sand flaking from his murderous face. Naruto stood in front of him, his sword strapped to his back with a green sash. Replacing his jacket and the shirt beneath it was a zip-up, sleeveless, black turtleneck. It blended seamlessly with his new black pants and sandals. His eyes were icy blue and the room temperature seemed to drop, the air around the boy wavering with power. Shikamaru stood not too far off, rubbing his cheek tentatively. Ow. Damn it, Naruto, I feel what he feels, remember? What are you doing? Naruto ignored Shikamaru, a scowl on his face. To release so much killing intent, Shikamaru frowned seriously. Why are you trying to kill Lee-san? Do you have some kind of grudge? No, Gaara said, his voice monotonous. I do not. It's not something that complicated. I'm going to kill him just because I want to. Oh yeah? Said Shikamaru, faking his cocky tone. Well, we're not going to let you do that. I mean, hey, you're strong, but we were holding back in the prelims too. Right now, 2 against 1, you don't stand a chance. You get in my way and you are dead. Gaara seemed unfazed by Shikamaru's comment, his teal-green eyes shining with hate. I'd like to see you try. Naruto shouted, grasping the azure-clothed hilt of his sword. Naruto, Shikamaru hissed at the blonde. Shut up. This guy's a monster. So? Naruto hissed back. I've got a real monster in me. He's nothing. A real monster, you say? Gaara seemed slightly intrigued. I was born a monster. I came into this world by taking the life of the woman I would have called mother. My father created me in order to be Suna's ultimate weapon. I was spoiled and allowed to do whatever I pleased. But starting around the time when I turned 6, my father tried countless times to assassinate me. Wait, Shikamaru said in consternation. I thought you said you were spoiled? A being too strong can become an existence of fear. Gaara didn't really specify if that was his answer or if he was just continuing his story. Everyone hated me and I found myself wondering why I went on with life. Why, then, do I exist? Why do I live? I could find no answer. But everyone needs a reason to live, or else it's the same as being dead. Finally, I came to this conclusion. I exist to kill everyone but myself. As long as there are people for me to kill, I will not vanish. The hell? Shikamaru was surprised. Now sand rose, gushing at high speed in the direction of Naruto and his companion. Let me feel alive! The sand suddenly fell to the floor as Gaara made eye contact with the dragon, only he could see that was hovering over the blonde's shoulder, his face frozen in shock. Gaara doubled over, clenching his head with his hands and screaming, his sand writhing and twisting on the floor, as if in pain. Slowly, the demonic sand ninja walked backward, heading towards the window, his sand following him obediently, as though a pathetic slave to him. His pain seemed to have lessened by the time he reached his goal, since he wasn't doubled over anymore, but he still appeared to be struggling with something. Regardless, he turned before he left, his right eye shut and his breathing labored. I will kill you guys. The crowd roared in excitement, eager to see the Chunin hopefuls tear into one another. The volume in the arena was deafening and the finals hadn't even started. Several people were making bets and odds continued to change and twist. Many nobles from lands far and wide sat in the stands, patiently awaiting their entertainment. The Hokage sat up in his private box with the Kazekage from the Land of Wind, watching the entire proceedings with a neutral expression on his face. Several guards were stationed around him protectively, each standing at attention with a serious expression. Likewise, the Kazekage had many guards as well, each willing to give his or her life. Shiranui-Genma frowned as he looked over the competitors, the senbon between his lips twitching incessantly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the candidates for Chunin had showed up for the finals. Neji, Naruto, Gaara, Kankuro, Shino, Shikamaru, and Temari were all accounted for. The only one missing was Uchiha Sasuke, the supposed star of the show. For the most part, as far as Genma knew, the majority of the examinees hadn't changed at all appearance-wise since the preliminaries. Niji still wore his pale, short-sleeved jacket and black shorts. Gaara looked like he had several sets of that uniform he wore. Kankuro still wore his strange black jumpsuit with the cat-eared hood. Temari had her revealing dress-like thing on, and Shino and Shikamura might as well have just come from the preliminaries. Except Naruto. Naruto's appearance had changed drastically from his original orange jumpsuit, especially concerning the color. His sword was strapped to his back with a green sash, a bright golden lotus-shaped clasp positioned on it just below his Zyphid process. Replacing his jacket and the shirt beneath it was a zip-up, sleeveless, black turtleneck. It blended seamlessly with his new black pants and sandals. His blonde hair was longer as well. Several strands of sun-kissed yellow fell over top of his hitaite, just long enough to cover the majority of the metal plate. The rest was even wilder and spikier than before, seemingly untamable by conventional means. 2 locks of blonde fell on each side of his face right in front of his ears, reaching down to his lobes, if barely. Genma had to hide his shock from the rest of the world, and he had no doubt that many others did too. The boy in front of him, with that serious scowl on his face and his analyzing blue eyes narrowed, looked like the reincarnation of the late 4th Hokage. Kakashi, Genma thought absently, was in for quite the surprise when he got back. "Hey, Mr. Examiner," Genma blinked himself out of his thoughts, looking up to see Naruto's hand raised. "Yeah?" he asked, trying to regain his composure. "What happens if Sasuke's not here in time for his match?" came the question, still with that serious look on his face. Well, Genma's Senbon twitched as he spoke, which Naruto thought was very dangerous. If he's not here by the time his match is scheduled to begin, he'll lose by default and be disqualified. Genma opened a pocket watch, looking at the time as Naruto nodded in understanding. He flipped it closed. It's time to begin the Chunin selection exam finals. If everyone but Hyuga-san and Uzumaki-san would proceed to the stands, we can begin. The other genin nodded and left, Naruto and Niji the only ones standing in the arena. Genma nodded, all right. He stepped up between the 2 boys, glancing at each of them for a few seconds. "You guys are up first, so make sure to put on a good show." He made a motion with his hand, "Begin." Niji sneered at the blonde, dropping into the stance of the Hyuga's famous Jukin. "I'll rejoice as I watch you fall to pieces when you discover reality." Naruto scowled, his right hand reaching up to the hilt of his sword. "I'm 10 times stronger than I was during the preliminaries." Niji's upper lip curled, the veins around his eyes bulging as the Byakugan activated. 10 times nothing is still nothing. You were fated to lose the moment I was chosen as your opponent. Up in the stands, Kurenai was thinking, this match will decide the threat level Naruto-san poses to enemy ninja. If he can defeat Niji-san, he might just be able to defeat Shino-kun as well. "You say that now," Naruto said, his sword sheath dissolving as he pulled out Hairinmaru, dashing for his enemy. "Try saying it again after I've beaten you." Niji pulled out a kunai, blocking the strike with it. He was surprised as he struggled to keep up the block, his hand shaking under the pressure. Naruto's expression was serious, his blue eyes glinting icily. "The fight's just started and I already have 2 advantages," Naruto told him, bringing his left hand up in a seal. "The first is the water vapor in the air. The second is that I've occupied one of your hands, preventing you from using jutsu." Slowly, the water in the air began to condense into several vague forms that slightly resembled Senbon. They formed a sort of cage around him, surrounding him from all sides in a death trap. Calmly, Naruto named his technique Sensatsu Suisho. The water needles rushed in, embedding themselves deeply in his body. Blood oozed and dripped, a small rivulet of it traveling down his chin. He looked up at the blonde in front of him, one eye half-lidded, then vanished in a puff of smoke, replaced by a heavily skewered log. Naruto twisted, bringing his left arm up to block near his shoulder. A glowing palm soared past him, mere inches from his face, but Naruto didn't even flinch. The inside of Niji's elbow pressed lightly against his forearm. A smirk curled on Naruto's lips. "Try again, idiot." Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as 4 glowing fingers sunk into his back painfully, not enough to break the skin but enough to feel as though they had. Foreign chakra flooded his body, threatening to shut down his kidneys. Then, with a splash of liquid, Naruto fell apart into a thick but shallow puddle of water, obviously not the real one. Niji's own eyes went wide as the implications sunk in, forcing him to reevaluate his opponent's abilities. He'd been surprised when the blonde had pulled off a water technique using the vapor in the air, but to have a water clone, which was 1/10 as strong as the original, do so was amazing. And he hadn't even been able to tell it was a water clone either. This brought about many questions. When and where had the blonde learned to use a foreign technique like Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu, and from whom? How did he form a Mizu Bunshin using vapor in the air? How did he learn to do something like that, and from whom? What other foreign jutsu did he know? Niji jumped to the side as a blue dragon soared towards him, its red eyes gleaming. It twisted around to follow him at the last second, but collided with ground, creating a large and long snake-like line of ice. He had seen the boy use this skill in the preliminaries, but that in no way prepared one to have it used on him or her. Above them, the sky darkened with black clouds. That just brought even more questions he should have asked the first time he had seen this beast. How did the blonde boy create a massive water dragon without any water around and then make it freeze on contact with something solid? Where did he learn to do something so complex and complicated with one technique? If it had been taught, who had taught him? Who even knew how to do something like that? This blonde boy should be simple. He was an orphan that had joined the academy to become a ninja. He took the graduation exam 3 times before he passed, and he passed in an unorthodox method. He had no exceptional skills and had passed at the bottom of his class. He was a loser who had just barely graduated from the academy. He should have been easy to beat. The Uzumaki boy, however, was anything but simple and ordinary. He was adept at kenjutsu, even though no one had ever taught him to use a sword. That implied many different things, but it confirmed none of them for sure. He could also do something that only the Nidaime Hokage had been able to do, and he had taken that ability farther as well. That begged a question that many had thought they could answer easily. It raised a query that most hadn't even thought existed, simply because of who the blonde was. Surely, his personality disarmed any opinions that would think of him as powerful. But now, the question was, who is Uzumaki Naruto? The blonde reappeared behind the large wall of ice, already going through hand seals. He stopped at Tiger, pursing his lips as he raised his fingers to them. He blew and Niji could immediately place a name to the jutsu, Katon, Kakaki no Jutsu. A giant fireball was released, roaring towards Niji and easily 3 times the size of any other that the Hyuga prodigy had seen. It soared toward him and Niji could do nothing but watch as it came closer. Its form seemed to grow as it came nearer, and the brunette half expected his life to flash before his eyes. The fireball stopped short, colliding with the wall of ice. It pushed roughly for several seconds before fizzing out into nothing. Niji was tempted to palm his face at the stupidity of the blonde, wondering himself why he thought the kid had any ability. That is, until the complexity of his opponent's plan was revealed. The ice had melted but not evaporated, lying on the arena floor like a large puddle. The blonde went through more hand seals, which numbered somewhere in the dozens, before stopping on bird. The water on the ground churned and swirled, twisting into a terrible beast as Naruto called out the name of his jutsu, Suetun, Suryuden no Jutsu. A giant dragon of water roared to life, twisting upwards from the puddle the blonde had just made. It locked its menacing gaze on him, baring its liquid fangs in a twisted and evil snarl as it leered at him. With a jerk of movement, it rushed for him in a torrent of water. Water that Niji had no doubt was boiling hot and painful. "Tch," he scoffed, gathering chakra around himself. "I guess it has come to this." He spun on his heel, creating a twister of himself. A dome of chakra formed around him, swirling to the time of his own spin, following his movements. The dragon crashed down on it, trying to break in to attack him. It splashed around his shield, splattering into nothing as his defense broke its form into nothing. As both the dragon and his dome disappeared, a crater was left behind with Niji in the center, calmly declaring, "Katon." "Heido no Senjusen," the blonde's voice called, prompting Niji to look up. His opponent was gathering a large amount of energy in his palm, pointing at him, Sokatsui. A burst of energy came at him faster than Niji could think to block, throwing his arms up in a makeshift defense. The blast collided with the ground in front of him, kicking up a cloud that would easily obscure anyone's vision. Niji nearly smirked as he caught on to the blonde's plan. "That won't work," he called, scanning the arena. "My eyes are able to see through even the densest of fogs. This cheap parlor trick doesn't give you any advantage." Niji received no answer, so he continued, hoping to irk his opponent, "You should have targeted me with that blast. You'll regret not doing so. After all, you only get 1 miracle per battle and you just used yours up." "You like to talk a lot, don't you?" a familiar voice asked from behind him. Niji turned around, barely dodging a stab aimed at his head. A shallow cut carved itself into his cheek, bleeding sluggishly. He jumped back, Naruto not moving at all. "But how?" Niji asked, dumbfounded. "How did you get behind me without you seeing me?" Naruto finished for him. He smirked in a vulpine manner. "That first attack was merely a distraction to grab your attention. While you were busy blocking it and seeing through my trick, you failed to realize that I had fired a second attack at the ground the second the dust cloud had formed. Niji's eyes went wide as Naruto continued. That second attack was used to dig a hole for myself. From there, I had my shadow clones dig a tunnel until I was right beneath you. After that, I dug myself out and attacked you from behind faster than you would see me. It's called Shunpa. Now. The boy in front of him puffed away into smoke, leaving nothing behind as the voice of another Naruto called over to him. What was that about 1 miracle per battle? Another dragon rushed toward Niji, who knew he couldn't dodge in time to avoid the brunt of the attack. He spun on his heel once more, turning himself into a twister of motion. He threw chakra from his entire body, watching as it spread out to create a large, impenetrable fortress. The dome spread, defending him from the attack. The dragon crashed against his defense, splashing around the dome as it was torn to pieces by Niji's chakra shield. What was different about this time, however, was that the dragon didn't just fall apart into water. No, its entirety spread around the dome of energy, freezing in place as it was blocked by the Hyuga's Kaiten. Eventually, a dome of thick ice, trapping the boy inside of it, replaced the dome of chakra. Now! Naruto called, going through hand seals. The dome melted as he stopped, turning into thousands of water needles, Sensatsu Suisho no Daikimusho. Shit! Niji swore, spinning again as he gathered more chakra desperately. Kaiten! With his last-second defense, Niji managed to block the needles and prevent his demise, escaping from the attack without a scratch. As he tried to regain his breath, however, a blur flitted in front of his eyes, landing next to him with its back turned. A cold sensation ran down his spine as his hands snapped together in front of him. So, Niji, Naruto started lowly, if I only get 1 miracle per battle, what's this? Niji looked down, still panting as his eyes widened to saucers. A chain tied his arms together at the wrists, too tight for him to do hand seals. They were also encased from the fingertips up to his elbows in ice, restricting his movements severely. He was also out of chakra. He'd lost. You're out of chakra, Niji, Naruto said, looking at him out of the corner of his eye. Do you give up? Niji sighed. Mr. Examiner, he called, the veins around his eyes receding, I must forfeit. Winner, Genma called as the ice around Niji's hands melted, the chain retracting into Hyarinmer's hilt, Uzumaki Naruto. The arena was silent for a moment, as though they had trouble believing the outcome of the spectacular battle. Naruto shifted uncomfortably under their gaze, waiting hesitantly for their reaction. Then, he heard a noise he hadn't thought he'd hear from a crowd of Konoha villagers and shinobi. It started out low and soft, as though the crowd didn't know how to react to his victory, then it grew. It grew louder and louder as more people joined in, some standing to make themselves known. The cheer rose in volume steadily, growing and growing until it became a deafening roar. They cheered for him. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly, grinning broadly like an idiot. His eyes searched the crowd, looking at each and every person calling out excitedly, until he found one particular person that made his heart soar. There, in the crowd, sitting next to her teammate Kiba, was Hyuga Hinata. Her eyes were shining with pride and excitement as she smiled down at him warmly. That, Naruto thought, made all of it worth it. The crowd was eerily silent, staring at him openly with surprise on their faces. Even the Hokage seemed flabbergasted, his pipe hanging from his lips limply, lifelessly. The Kazekage showed no outward signs of emotion. No one would have seen it because of the mask, anyway, merely locking his stony and eager gaze on the child that had stumped the crowd. He shrugged. He honestly didn't care what the crowd thought of him, or what the foreign dignitaries judged of him. It wasn't a part of his personality to care. It was far too troublesome to worry about the opinions of others, so he thought, why bother? That was his take on the majority of things in the world. He frowned. Lately, things had become much more troublesome than usual, simply because of one person. Word spread like wildfire in a village as populated as Konoha, so much so that a new rumor was common knowledge by the next morning. That made things even more troublesome, especially when you took in the subject of those rumors. Ever since the preliminaries a month previous, Naruto had been the subject of debate and rumors amongst the ninja and civilians of the village, popping up in even the oddest of conversations. For a while, even, it seemed as if Ino couldn't choose between the new and improved Naruto and Sasuke, the one she was supposedly in love with. Some of the rumors about the boy were truly absurd, bordering on clinical paranoia. Some thought that the snake Sannin had returned and claimed the blonde as his new apprentice, teaching him the ways of the sword and plenty of new jutsu. They thought that he'd given Naruto his weapon and taught him how to use it. Others thought that he had made a deal with the Kyubi no Yoko, which was truly amazing to him. They thought that the demon was plotting its revenge on Konoha for being defeated by the fourth Hokage and humiliated the way it was. He had trouble understanding their logic, simply for the fact that he'd been told all his life that the demon fox had been killed. Some even thought, and Shikamaru nearly shivered at the idea, that Naruto was the reincarnation of a dragon god whose domain was ice. Their idea was that the dragon Naruto summoned with his sword was his true form that was locked away within his human body. Those people had built a small shrine near the river, praying to it that the dragon god would be freed from his mortal prison. He knew their ideas and theories were absurd and ridiculous, but he couldn't completely discredit them when he himself didn't know the truth. It was all too troublesome, but his curiosity wouldn't let him rest until he discovered what exactly was happening. Naruto, who he had thought was one of the boring, uncool guys like himself, was quickly becoming one of the genius prodigies Konoha celebrated so much. So troublesome. Huh? Genma asked incredulously, his saban threatening to fall from his loose lips. He looked as if he'd been told that the Tsuchikage of Iwagakure wore pink underwear decorated with pretty red hearts. Whwa, Temari stuttered, her eyes wide and her mouth dropped open in shock. He was half tempted to tell her she'd catch flies if she didn't shut it. What did you say? That's right. You heard me, Shikamaru said lazily. I quit. It was fun and all, but this wouldn't last much longer, anyway. I'm almost out of chakra. In fact, I think I've got enough to hold this for another 10 seconds tops. What? Temari asked, dumbfounded. You mean that, after all that talk about not losing to a girl, and after all the trouble you gave me, you're forfeiting? Throwing in the towel? Must I repeat myself? Shikamaru retorted rudely, his shadow retracting from her form. There, you happy? I couldn't fight back even if I wanted to. You win. Genma started slowly, as if the words refused to leave his lips. His eyes were still wide as he continued, trying to force the next phrase into the air, Winner Temari. Everyone tensed as a whirlwind exploded a few feet from Shikamaru, kicking up a thin cloud of dust. Leaves that had not been there before danced about the high-speed winds, some crumpling under the pressure. In a quick burst, the winds dissipated, revealing two figures back to back as the leaves slowly fell to earth. The first person was tall, nearly twice as much so as his shorter companion. He wore navy blue under a green flak jacket, a mask hiding most of his face. A Konoha Hittite was slung over his left eye, hiding the socket beneath. His light gray hair spiked up, as if defying the laws of gravity. His hands were nestled in his pockets. The second person was a boy easily half the older one's age, no more than 13 or 14 at best. His bangs were long and parted to frame his face, easily reaching to the very edge of his jawbone. His dark eyes were observant, flickering about the stadium as a small smirk quirked at the right side of his lips. His raven black hair spiked backwards at the back of his head, kind of like the hind end of a chicken. Naruto smirked, cupping his mouth with one hand as he leaned against the steel railing. Hey, Sasuke. The younger of the two figures looked up, his expression remaining mostly neutral as the blonde continued, What's the sword for? Compensation. I don't know, Naruto, Sasuke called back, a smirk on his lips as he lightly fingered the hilt of the ninjato strapped horizontally to the back of his waist. What's yours for? Instead of responding, Naruto grinned broadly, a challenge flashing in his blue eyes. Sasuke seemed to read the look correctly, seeming surprised for a second before the smirk returned full force. He nodded, hoping his blonde rival had understood that he would gladly match blades whenever the Chunin exams were over. Feeling a pair of eyes on the back of his head, Sasuke turned slightly to look behind him. Gaara's imposing figure stood in the stands, his eyes stony and dark, as if he were staring at his next prey. Sasuke flinched for a second as Gaara's face split into an evil and maniacal grin, one that threatened to crack his head in half. He blinked in surprise and the grin was gone. He repressed a shiver. This guy was beyond creepy. He felt a bit of his confidence drain at the prospect of facing this man. He hardened his resolve. He was an Uchiha. A single genin like Gaara wasn't going to shake him. He would fight. And he would win. I'm sorry, Kakashi addressed the examiner, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. We got kind of sidetracked. He's not disqualified, is he? No, Genma smirked. You guys were really late, but we pushed his match back to last. As a matter of fact, we should probably be starting by now. Oh, right, Kakashi said, vanishing in a puff of smoke, only to reappear in the stands. Temari and Shikamaru followed his lead, heading back upstairs as Gaara appeared from the stairwell and walked calmly towards his opponent. Don't lose to this guy, Sasuke, Naruto muttered as Genma stood between the two genin. Now finally, Genma said, a smirk tugging at his lips. Begin. As sand burst from Gaara's gourd, Sasuke jumped back, watching what his opponent would do from afar. He only knew what Kakashi had told him, nothing more. The rest of his opponent's skills were a mystery to him. The sand seemed to flinch, wriggling as if in agony. Ugh! Gaara grasped his head in pain, muttering, "Don't be so angry, Ka-san. That blood I gave you earlier, it was disgusting. But I promise. This blood will be so much better." What the? Sasuke's eyes widened slightly. What the hell is he talking about? TCH, Sasuke scoffed as Gaara flinched again, cringing. Then the calm facade had returned, Gaara's empty teal eyes glaring at him from rings of black. The redhead's brow furrowed as his lips drew tight, his arms folded in his typical fashion. The sand was calm, floating around the boy smoothly. "Come," the boy uttered lowly, his voice dangerous. In a blur, Sasuke dashed towards his opponent, kicking up a trail of dust as he moved. He flung 2 shuriken, watching as the sand rose up and grabbed them out of the air. It morphed into a copy of Gaara, glaring at him with the 2 shuriken grasped in its fingers. It exploded outwards and Sasuke leapt up, tossing 2 more of the throwing stars as the Gaara clone tried to use his previous ones against him. They collided with each other and fell to the ground. Sasuke landed, punching a hole through the doppelganger, the sand grasping at his wrist. He brought his other hand up in a palm strike, blasting the sand clone's head to bits. He rushed forwards again, aiming a punch at the redhead's face. The sand rose to block, but Sasuke vanished, reappearing behind Gaara. To his opponent's shock, he landed a solid punch on the Suna shinobi's left cheek, sending him flying. The sand formed a cushion for Gaara, standing him back up as it repaired the damaged section of Suna no Yoroi. Gaara's glare seemed to intensify. "That speed," Guy remarked in surprise. He turned to his eternal rival, Kakashi-san. "You?" "I did," Kakashi nodded. "I focused on the fight happening below. I had him imagine how Lee would fight and copy it. Needless to say, he picked it up quite well." "I see," Guy said seriously. "But you do realize that pure taijutsu won't be enough for this, don't you? Even my brilliant pupil couldn't beat Gaara-san with taijutsu alone." "Taijutsu isn't all I taught him," Kakashi remarked lightly, revealing no secrets. "Sasuke-kun and I are very similar people." In a blur, Sasuke was upon him again, landing another punch. It hit and he continued, lifting himself and Gaara into the air as he went. A second punch, an elbow to the gut, a knee to the solar plexus, and a palm strike to the left chest. He grabbed the boy's white sash and tan strap, swinging his head forward and into Gaara's. Using his opponent's shock, he twisted around, throwing him into the ground. Sasuke landed lightly, panting heavily. Gaara stood slowly, but Sasuke allowed him no reprieve, punching him squarely in the jaw with enough force to leave a crater in the wall. Gaara flew backwards several feet, landing on a soft cushion of sand. He stood slowly as his Suna no Yoroi slowly began to flake off, revealing the pale flesh of his face. The sand swirled, forming an orb around him as he moved his hands into a single seal. There were several surprised gasps in the crowd, mainly from the team of sand ninja that Gaara called comrades. That alone drew Naruto's attention as an ominous feeling settled into his stomach. "Jin, Saru, Hibi, Saru," Gaara chanted within the orb, hands locked in a hand seal. Sand trickled upward and formed an eyeball that stared out at Sasuke. "Jin, Saru, Tori, Tatsu." Sasuke scowled, glaring at the orb in front of him. Wary of this new technique, he tossed a shuriken towards his foe, watching as a spike of sand shot out from the sphere and destroyed the small throwing weapon easily. His scowl deepening, Sasuke dashed towards the orb at amazing speeds. "Nezumi, Saru, Jin." Blood trickled down Sasuke's cheek, fist, and left leg, spikes of sand protruding from the orb just barely having missed impaling him. He had come far too close to losing a body part there, and he would have if it hadn't been for his Sharingan. He jumped backwards, doing several flips before he landed on the arena wall, sitting on it like a stool. "I have 2 options," Sasuke told himself, "and Kakashi warned me to only use that as a last resort. Chidori it is, then." "Nezumi, Usagi, Tora, Tori, Jin?" Nodding to himself, Sasuke flashed through 3 quick hand seals, bracing his left arm with his right hand. Chakra gathered, quickly turning into a blue lightning that fizzled loudly. The sound of 1,000 birds chirping filled the area as Sasuke crouched on the wall, prepared to make a fast dash. Guy turned to Kakashi in shock. "Kakashi-san, you didn't?" "I told you, Guy-san," Kakashi said in a firm monotone. "Sasuke-kun and I are very similar people." Then, to the eyes of the roaring crowd, Sasuke became a blur as he ran full speed down the wall, a trail of destruction left in his wake. As he hit the ground, he continued forward, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. The crowd roared even louder as Sasuke closed in on his opponent, his Sharingan allowing him to dodge the spikes that shot towards him. With only a fraction of resistance, Sasuke's hand cut through the barrier of sand surrounding Gaara, passing quickly through the sphere and striking the red-haired boy within. All was quiet as the crowd waited with bated breath for the result to show itself. "What's this? This warm moisture?" Gaara's voice asked, confusion and fear running rampant. "Blood? Is this my blood?" An ear-splitting shriek rent the air, the cry of a dying man. The crowd slowly fell asleep, lulled by a genjutsu cast by a traitor amongst their number. Several Konoha shinobi broke it easily, moving to intercept the disguised sand and sound ninja. An explosion obscured the Kage box from view and several ANBU were already making their way to help. Hinata twisted, cutting her opponent down in a brilliant flash of steel. She spun slightly, her sword slicing cleanly through a kunai and down her enemy's middle, splitting him open from eyes to crotch. He fell to the ground, screaming as his damaged heart slowed to stop in the open air. Bile rose in Hinata's throat, but she refused to give up now in this most important of times. She would not die, not now, not when she had yet to tell Naruto how she felt. There were too many things she still had to do before she could die. Tobium whispered soft words of comfort in her ears and she steeled her resolve. Another enemy rose up to attack her, arms spread wide as if a tiger pouncing on his prey. Hinata moved fluidly, faster than her foe could follow, and stabbed forwards as he tried to grab her. Her razor-sharp sword sunk into his chest, destroying his heart in an instant. He went slack, dead before he could react. A battle cry called out behind her, and she spun around, pulling her sword free as she twisted her body. Her wrist flicked downwards, carrying her blade in a diagonal arc. A neat, thin line carved itself into her enemy's body, but Hinata had no doubt that it was very deep. He fell to the ground, screaming as he slowly bled to death. Hinata took pity on him and severed his spine at the base of his neck. Another enemy came and Hinata severed his head, watching with barely concealed horror as the body thumped to the ground lifelessly. Tears stung her eyes as she turned and slit the throat of her next foe, wishing she could turn her Byakugan off so that she didn't have to see their faces, immortalized in pain at their death. A chill ran up her spine as Dragon of Ice leapt over her shoulder, engulfing every one of the enemy ninja around her in a column of frozen water. It even stripped the flesh from some of them, bearing raw skin and sometimes even muscle or bone. She felt her heartbeat quicken, her breath catching in her throat as she realized what that dragon meant. She struggled to hide her smile. A black-clad figure followed the dragon, landing a scant few feet in front of her with his sword drawn and his gaze stony. He pointed a single finger at the row of frozen ninja, energy gathering at the tip rapidly. In a solemn, serious voice that she rarely heard him use, he said, "Heido no Yan, Byakurai." A bolt of white energy tore a large hole through each of the ninja, killing them instantly. The ice, however, prevented the blood from spilling out over the ground, catching all of it and keeping it inside the bodies. Naruto suddenly spun around, thrusting his sword at her. Alarmed, she watched as it rushed past her shoulder and into the heart of another enemy. He had saved her. Then, he did something that nearly brought the girl to her knees. He kissed her on the forehead, pulling her into a tight hug as she felt her eyes widen to incredible size. A feeling of warmth pooled in her belly, uncoiling from the depths of her middle to envelop the entirety of her body. Belatedly, she realized he was whispering something in her ear. "Be careful, Hinata-chan," he said to her, his breath tickling her ear. "Make sure to stay safe, all right?" "But Naruto-kun," she protested quietly. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to follow Sasuke," Naruto said firmly, his eyes hard like diamonds. "He has no idea what he's in for." But Hinata protested, worried for his safety. "What if?" "Don't worry," he told her, smiling slightly. "I'm going to be just fine." There was an explosion deep in the forest, and suddenly Naruto had let go, telling her, "Got to go. Stay safe." In a flash, he was gone, leaping over the stands and into the woods. Within seconds, he was out of her line of sight, maybe even for the last time. Belatedly, she whispered, "Good luck, Naruto-kun." As another enemy leapt towards her, Hinata swung her sword, releasing a bulging ball of energy in a cry similar to a firework streaking through the sky. In an explosion of pink, her enemy, as well as several of the seats surrounding her, was no more. Sasuke leaned up against the tree, clutching the junction of his neck and shoulder as the pain racked his body. Little flame-like black markings crept over his skin, consuming almost the entire right side of his body. His chakra was at an all-time low, and he was too tired to even think of drawing his sword. He had lost to the demonic Gaara. He grunted as another wave of pain washed over his aching body, tensing as his worn and sore muscles twitched in time with his agony. His eyes shut, clenching tightly as he bit his lip, drawing blood. A pain-filled screech threatened to tear itself from his lips, but he wouldn't let it, and it came out as a sort of stressed gurgle. He panted, glaring over at the sand shinobi who was taking so much glee in his pain. That maniacal grin that Sasuke had seen for but a split second just before their match was back in full force, stretching over Gaara's face and threatening to crack the boy's head in half. An insane chuckle escaped those lips, bloodshot teal eyes glaring at him with enough bloodlust to kill small animals. Sasuke wasn't sure how it had come to this, how it had come to him being the one losing. During their match at the stadium, he had been in control because his Chidori was powerful enough to punch through Gaara's defensive sand. That had led to Gaara running away and Sasuke following him into the forest. After he had caught up with the wounded Gaara and his teammates, Kankuro had decided to stay behind and fight him. He had been prepared to take the puppet user down fast and hard so he could follow the redhead, but Abirame Shino had shown up and claimed that he had never gotten to have his fight in the finals. That had allowed Sasuke to bypass the puppeteer and follow the blonde girl carrying Gaara. He thought that he would have had to fight the girl before Gaara, too, but the sand user had simply pushed the blonde out of the way and went insane. Sasuke had grinned eagerly, ready to settle the fight they hadn't gotten to complete during the exams. He had expected to clinch a victory rather easily, since Gaara was susceptible to his Chidori. The fight had gotten so much weirder after that, though, and Sasuke wasn't entirely sure just what had happened. Gaara had done something really strange with his sand, something Sasuke hadn't thought he had enough control to do. Gaara had turned his sand into an arm, a tail, and half of a raccoon's face, one gleaming golden eye glaring out at him. Sasuke had thought it was strange, but hadn't paid it much mind, to be honest. No matter what distortions the sand genin made to his body, Sasuke figured that it still wouldn't make much of a difference in the long run. His Chidori still held a certain measure of strength over Gaara's sand, and no amount of bodily enhancements with the stuff would change that. Or so he had thought. Sasuke tensed again as another wave of pain swept over him, biting his cheek to keep from screaming out. The pain reached its apex and Sasuke let out a low groan as he tried to keep himself from crying out. The pain suddenly spiked, to the boy's shock, and he couldn't help the scream that left his lips, aag. As it turned out, Gaara was pretty much immune to pain in this new form of his, and that made it a whole lot harder to fight him. Sasuke had severed the sand arm with his Chidori, thinking that would be the end of it. Gaara, however, had merely grinned insanely as his gourd expanded and morphed again, reforming the arm of sand effortlessly. Up until that point, Sasuke had been relying on his own strength and power. He became desperate, however, when it was obvious that he wasn't strong enough on his own. He had called on the power of the curse mark, Orochimaru's heaven seal, in an effort to take down his powerful enemy. In the end, his efforts had proven useless and pointless, and had done nothing but waste his chakra in a futile effort at victory. He wasn't sure what exactly was going to happen to him, but he figured that Gaara was going to do what he seemed best at. He was going to kill Sasuke with his sand, like he was known to do. Strangely, that didn't bother Sasuke even half as much as he had expected it to. Despite the fact that his goal in life was unfinished, he was somehow at peace with the fact that he was going to die. He may not have revived his clan or even killed Itachi, but he was going to get to see his mother again. Sasuke leaned up against the tree trunk, letting out a peaceful sigh as the thought entered his mind. The curse seal receded as it lacked energy to draw on, the black markings fading from his skin at the peaceful thought. Despite the fact that he was going to die, he was going to see his mother again after 5 long years. He would get to see her smiling face again. He sighed again, closing his eyes as he braced himself for Gaara's murderous touch, gently murmuring, "Mother." Gaara suddenly backed up from Sasuke's relaxed body, stumbling as he grasped at his head, as if in some sort of agonizing pain. He let out a groan that was more like the whine of an injured child, his eyes wide in pain and fear. He bit his bottom lip, tears welling up at the bottom of his eyes as that one word drew up memories he had long since repressed. "Your mother loved you very much," a voice told him in his mind, the image of a blonde-haired man appearing in his mind's eye. The man was smiling at him lovingly as he bandaged the small cut on his hand. "And I loved your mother, my sister, very much, Gaara. And that means that I love you, as well." "Yashimaru," Gaara said in a small voice, the tears threatening to spill. "There's only one thing that can heal a wounded heart, Gaara," the voice continued, the astral Yashimaru resting a hand on Gaara's chest. The smile was gentle and caring, the man's calm blue eyes staring into Gaara's hurt teal ones, gazing upon the redhead with affection. "The only thing that can heal a wounded heart, Gaara, is love." Gaara let out an ear-shattering shriek as he reared his arm of sand back, glaring at the boy sitting in front of him. He brought his gigantic fist down, crying out, "Da Uchiha!" "Ruler!" a voice called. "The mask of flesh and bone. All creation, flutter of wings. He who bears the name of man, truth and temperance, upon the wall of sinless dreams unleash but slightly the wrath of your claws. Heido no Senjusen, so Katsui. Gaara's arm suddenly became a makeshift shield as he brought it up to block the ball of blue fire rushing towards him, intent on frying him to death. It exploded against the sand, scattering a large chunk of the arm and revealing Gaara's real arm. In an instant, the arm reformed again, but Sasuke was nowhere to be seen. Gaara looked up, glaring at the blue-eyed blonde that had stolen his prey away from him as those sapphire orbs pierced his soul. The 8-petal lotus design on the circular clasp for his green sash gleamed in the light streaming down from the canopy, the gold seeming to burn a fiery red as it reflected the bright ultraviolet. Gaara's eyes narrowed, his teeth bared in a snarl. This boy dared to steal his prey away from him? He dared to get in the way of their match, just as Gaara was about to prove his existence? He dared to stand up to Gaara as if he were something special? A growl bubbled up in Gaara's chest, rising to the surface ruthlessly. I can see that you're not going to back down, Naruto sighed, reaching up for the hilt of his sword. If you're going to go any further, I'm afraid I have to intercept you. Naruto leapt into the air, unsheathing his sword in an instant as he swung downward, Soten and Ai's ace, Hyarinmaru. A blue dragon made of nearly frozen water was unleashed, its gaping maw wide as it rushed toward its target. Its red eyes stared at the sand ninja, fangs of liquid bared in a dark snarl. Gaara thrust his arm of sand forward, pushing it against the nose of the beast aimed to encase him in ice. The dragon engulfed the entire arm, splashing around the limb as it continued into the tree branch beneath the redhead. When the dragon had subsided, it left behind several spikes of ice on the branch and bark, each of which was thick and dense, as they refracted the light streaming through the canopy. Gaara looked down at his arm in shock to see that all of the compacted sand had disappeared and his sleeve had been torn off roughly, leaving bare, healthy skin covered in a thin layer of frost. Sand rushed as Gaara growled, thrusting his palm toward Naruto again as a paw grew from his gourd. The paw crashed through thin air as the blonde disappeared in a soft whoosh, reappearing behind Gaara with his sword poised to stab. The boy's blue eyes were dangerously serious, like icy chips in the frozen sea. Senga, Naruto said coldly, pushing his sword forward. It sank into the sand a few inches, the tip moving to impale the redhead's right shoulder. Naruto's eyes widened, however, as the sand swirled and grabbed his steel tightly, preventing further penetration. Gaara looked back at him, teal eyes triumphant. Naruto could see now why Sasuke had lost to the insane shinobi. Gaara's control over his sand was beyond impressive. In fact, it was far greater than the control that Haku had had over water and ice, and Haku's control had been very impressive. Against Gaara, Sasuke, who was better at close-range attacks than anything, would lose quite quickly. Naruto, however, had far more tricks up his sleeve than Sasuke. Sasuke had only focused on learning one technique over the course of the month while Naruto had learned many, even some that none had ever seen before. Those techniques were what would give Naruto his great advantage over Gaara. Sprinkled on the bones of the beast, Naruto's free hand came up, pointing to the trap sword. Sharp tower, red crystal, steel ring. Move and become the wind, stop and become the calm. The sound of warring spears fills the empty castle. Heido no Rokujusen, Raikoho. A blast of yellow energy was fired, point blank, into the sand covering Gaara's shoulder, blowing it away. Naruto pulled his sword free as Gaara let out a loud scream, his voice shrill and pained as the agony of Naruto's spell set in. Vaguely, Naruto could see raw red skin beneath a hole in the sand ninja's shirt. He moved to make another attack, but stopped as Gaara's shriek of pain tapered off into a maniacal laugh that lilted through the trees, ringing in the tall forest canopy. Naruto watched warily as Gaara turned around, the sand around his arm and face mutating until both arms had become monstrous sand limbs. The Uchiha was nothing, Gaara said insanely, an insane grin threatening to split his face. In you, I have found a true measure. You are my prey. There was a sudden gush of sand that burst outward, crushing trees as it took on a solid, corporeal form. Gaara disappeared in the large mass, his form hidden by the dirt, dust, and rock particles that made up his attack style. Naruto jumped backwards as the massive ball threatened to engulf him too, watching as it took on a definite shape. Purple markings covered the entire body of the creature, strange and almost like some sort of cultic tattoos. The tail was thick and had multiple protrusions, as if it were some kind of mace used to club enemies to death. The teeth were jagged and replaced any form of lips that may have once existed. The eyes were a dull gold surrounded by a sea of black. Naruto scowled as the beast turned its eyes to him, a wicked gleam in the depths of the diamond-shaped pupils. The tail wagged slightly, bowling over several tall trees and kicking up a cloud of dust and dirt. Icy blue met gold as the opponents sized each other up, taking in each other's forms. Fangs of sand curled into a wicked grin. Naruto stabbed his sword into the tree trunk, flashing through hand seals as the beast focused all of its attention on him. The air around him swirled and the ice chunks that had frozen next to Gaara's body melted, twisting and morphing in midair as Naruto manipulated them to his will. He stopped on the final hand seal, bird, and watched as the water he had gathered took on a specified form. He shouted, Suetun, Tsuryuden no Jutsu. The dragon leapt at the demonic creature, smashing into its right foreleg. It pushed with all the might it had against its target, attempting to pull the demon's leg out from under itself. The beast merely scowled, doing nothing but watching as the water dragon fizzled out, revealing an uninjured leg. I see, Naruto sighed. So that's how strong this guy is, huh? The air remained silent, giving no answer to his question. I guess I'd better step it up too, huh? He grasped his sword tightly, gathering energy for his own transformation of sorts. I imagine I'd be using the stupid fox's chakra if I didn't have you, Hyarinmaru. His eyes sharpened into glints of steel. Time to use that technique you taught me. Orochimaru chuckled, tearing the fake face off in a display of rubbery flesh as the Sandaime Hokage looked on in barely suppressed disgust and horror. He smirked cockily, golden eyes flashing in triumph as 3 wooden boxes started to rise from the tiles of the building. The entirety of his plans began to merge as the shock on his former teacher's face turned to vicious determination. Sarutobi flashed through hand seals as the coffins rose, watching in satisfaction as the first 2 tilted on the roof, preventing the third from rising up. He breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that the final coffin would have released a foe even he would lose to almost instantly. It was bad enough that he would be facing his former teachers, but to face the 4th Hokage, he would be doomed. It wouldn't have stopped with him, though. If the 4th, Namikaze Minato, the famous Konoha no Kiroi Senku, the yellow flash of Konoha, had been successfully summoned, then Orochimaru would not have stopped at merely killing his sensei. No, Orochimaru would have continued on to the village, and nothing would have stopped him. If the Snake Sannin had managed to bring back Minato, Kakashi, the man's student and a powerful asset to the Leaf, would have been unable to react in time to do anything. He would have been too overcome by shock and grief to fight back and would have been annihilated before he could do anything. Most of the village's shinobi would have similar reactions. If Orochimaru had succeeded in reviving the 4th, then the entire village would have been doomed. Jiraiya, who had recently returned for a small duration, might be able to put up a decent fight, but it was still doubtful that the man would defeat his previous student. The old man's eyes narrowed as the 2 large boxes creaked open, the lids falling to the roof tiles with a loud thud. 2 figures stepped out from within, each wearing his own version of battle armor on the chest and arms. The first had long, smooth black hair held from his face by a Konoha Hittite. The second had spiky white hair held back by a helmet similar to the one that Yamato, a trusted ANBU, wore. He also had 3 red marks on his face, 1 horizontal on each cheek and 1 vertical on his chin. The Shodai and Nidaime Hokage. It's been a long time, the Nidaime said, monkey? The Shodai mused. You've grown old, haven't you, Sarutobi? I would not have thought I would meet with you 2 brothers again like this, Sarutobi said grimly. It's regrettable. Please make your preparations to be defeated. How about you forget the chatter and get started? Orochimaru asked in annoyance. He pulled out 2 kunai, each tagged with a strange paper, and inserted it into their heads. Instantly, any and all injuries on the 2 Hokage dissipated into thin air with a hiss of steam, revealing flawless skin and sturdy armor that both looked brand new. Orochimaru grinned, stepping back as the Shodai and Nidaime regained all of the health they had lost when they had died. Let's get started, shall we? The third rushed forward without any warning, flashing through hand seals as he drew closer to his new enemies. He stopped on Tiger, taking in a deep breath as his chakra churned and morphed. He blew out, mentally chanting, Katan Karya Enden. A thick, powerful stream of fire raced forth toward his foes, incinerating several roof tiles in a blaze of flames. The Nidaime went through his own set of seals, calling, Suetun, Sujin Hiki. He spat out a torrent of water that swirled around the 3 ninja to form a thick barrier, protecting them from harm. The fire-style skill collided with it powerfully, sizzling out as the water began to evaporate under the intense heat. As the Karyo Enden dissipated, the Nidaime went through more hand seals. He stopped abruptly on Bird, the water swirling to take a draconic shape, Suetun, Suryuden. The third flashed through his own set of hand seals, spitting out a huge globe of mud that quickly formed a barrier between him and the water dragon intent on destroying him. He named the technique as the dragon crashed into it, breaking down into its base element, Doton, Doria Hiki. The Shodai sped through a set of his own seals, muttering, Mokuton, Jukai Kuden. The Sandaime jumped atop his tall barrier wall, going through yet another sequence of seals as thick roots wound their way towards him. They grabbed onto him just as he finished, wrapping him in a thick bondage as a plume of smoke arose in front of him. An ape appeared, clothed in shinobi garb and a tiger-skin pelt, a Konoha Hittite wrapped around his forehead and pushing back his thick white hair. He turned serious eyes from Orochimaru as he looked back at the one who had summoned him. "You're pathetic, you know that, Sarutobi? This is all because you didn't kill him when you had the chance." "That's what we're going to do now," Sarutobi told him. "Enma, use the Kongonio." Right, the ape spun, another plume of smoke arising to cover him. "Transform." The Monkey King's form shifted, turning into a large staff as it cut through the tree roots binding the third Hokage. The Sandaime grasped the huge, thick pole as he fell free, glaring down at his traitorous student, Orochimaru. The snake Sanime merely smirked up at his old teacher, confident of his victory. The snake man's mouth opened, revealing one of the slimy serpents, which, in turn, opened its own mouth to reveal the hilt of a sword. Orochimaru grasped the hilt, pulling it loose to reveal the legendary Kusanagi no Tsurugi, Ku no Tachi. His smirk widened as he brandished the sword in front of himself. Sarutobi jumped off his stone wall, crying, "Let's go, Enma!" He landed, rushing forward and taking a swipe at his foes. The Shodai and Nidaime jumped over and ducked under his weapon respectively, watching as the third thrust Enma forward. The pole extended, crashing into Orochimaru's sword as the snake man blocked it. The two Hokage under his command reacted, kicking the Sandaime backwards where he fell onto his butt. "Please don't disappoint me too much," Orochimaru smirked. A sizzling sound interrupted anything else he might have said as two explosive notes, one on each of the Hokage, exploded in a burst of smoke, destroying the former Fire Shadow's legs. Orochimaru laughed as the legs reformed. "Your breath seemed to be coming rather fast, you know." The Sandaime sighed, setting Enma down as he made his seal. "The exchanges of jutsu end here." Naruto tightened his grip on his sword, the blue cloth rubbing comfortably against his palm. The energy in his body gathered as he prepared himself for his next maneuver, staring down the hulking form of the massive Gaara, or whatever he had become. The power surged as he pointed his sword forward, his body glowing white. The large beast stared him down with a familiar look on its face and in its eyes, one that Naruto had seen on Gaara mere minutes before. The look was decidedly creepier on a huge, demonic beast than it was on a person, as wicked fangs of sand curved in a maniacal grin. The beast's huge stomach twitched as a soft chuckle hissed past its teeth. A single word left Naruto's mouth, one that no one else in the world would understand. His lips curled to fit the syllables as they came out in a dense, solid uttering Bankai. A bright flash lit up the area, nearly blinding the large beast that was Gaara as the blonde boy's energy output flared and spiked nearly beyond belief. Within the beast of sand, the red-headed shinobi felt something that had not existed in his heart since the days when Yashimara had been alive. Not even the Uchiha's attack in the stadium had brought it out. Fear. A trickling doubt wormed its way into his mind as the bright light began to fade and a shivering breath left his mouth. The golden eyes of the foe's Shikaka locked onto the area his prey had been seconds before, widening as its gaze found something truly remarkable in the world of shinobi. Several trees were frozen over, covered in a dense ice as a fine mist hovered over them. There, within the trees and not having moved from his spot, stood the powerful blonde boy whose aura saturated the air in a thick fog. Beyond anything the sand shinobi had seen before, Naruto had changed nearly as drastically as he had. Wings of ice spread outward, maneuvering with amazing ease considering their composition. They were attached to the Konoha Genin's back, covering his shoulders with a protective layer. Beneath the wings was a large tail of ice that flicked back and forth, as if it belonged on the boy. A thick layer of jagged ice covered the blonde's right arm, encasing his fist and the hilt of his sword in a dragon's head. His feet were covered in ice as well, forming what appeared to be a dragon's paws. His left arm, from elbow to wrist, was also covered in ice, a claw-like paw attached to the wrist. The hilt guard on the sword appeared to be the only thing that had changed about the katana, morphing into an 8-point star. 4 ice flowers, each with 4 petals, hovered around the blonde's form. Naruto's eyes were frigid blue, dagger and Hyarinmaru. Great crimson lotus ice ring. Before Gaara could react, Naruto had leapt off of his branch and started flying towards him, sword brandished threateningly as he let out his war cry, "HAA!" His sword sank into the sand, penetrating the raccoon demon's shoulder as he cried, "Die! Ryusenka!" Instantly, a trail of ice leapt forward, cutting across the beast's back and into its hind leg, freezing and encasing a large amount of sand. Naruto pulled his sword loose, crashing the blade against the ice, shouting, "Kadakuro!" The ice shattered into hundreds of large chunks, falling to the ground and taking with it a good portion of the Ichibi's fine-grained body. Surprised, Gaara tried to regain the sand by forcing it from the ice that had spontaneously formed the moment Naruto's sword had penetrated his sandy and admittedly fragile body. He could not pull the grains free. The sand moved and twisted as Gaara's head and torso appeared from within the Shikaku's giant body, glaring out at the blonde that posed so much of a threat to his existence. He gathered chakra, forming a single-hand seal as he named his indirectly fatal technique, Tanuki Nairi no Jutsu. Instantly, Gaara collapsed, asleep where he was as he allowed his demon free run of his body, and the sand he commanded. The huge beast instantly perked up, growing slightly larger as its eyes took on a brighter golden hue. Yahoo, I'm free! The beast turned its gaze to Naruto, who was floating in the air as if he were standing on solid ground, and I've even got prey sitting here waiting for me. The demon swiped at him with its paw, as if it were swatting a bug out of the air. Naruto did a midair barrel roll, cutting into the beast's paw as it passed him. Instantly, the entire paw froze over, falling off of the arm as if it had been amputated by an expert surgeon. A second later, the paw reformed as if it had never been missing. Naruto dodged out of the way of another swipe, cutting once more into the sand and watching it freeze a second time. Again, the missing part reformed almost as soon as the original fell off. A third swipe and retaliation brought much the same result, and Naruto soon realized that he was running out of options. He stopped moving, bracing himself for the next swipe. The gigantic paw loomed over him and came forth at astounding speed, considering its remarkable size. He pulled his wings in front of himself at the last second, blocking the attack as it hit him full on. The blows sent him flying into the shrubbery, where he collided with it painfully. Shikaku grinned when his opponent hit the earth and did not get back up afterwards, staying on the ground. He didn't care that he couldn't see the little gnat, and he wouldn't pretend that it hadn't been annoying to have so much sand cut from his body, but he had won in the end. So much for the foe that Gaara had so much trouble with. Shikaku turned towards the village, which he could see in the distance, and prepared to move towards it when a voice rang out, one that he only knew through his fragile vessel, Ban ho isai kaijin tenace, Ryujin Jaka. It came without warning, a searing heat that could easily burn the entire forest down should it be directed in such a manner. It came up his right foreleg, cleaving it right up the center, and quickly moving up towards his shoulder. He turned an angry golden gaze to the boy that dared to attack him, watching as the tiny figure ran vertically up his arm. In his hands, the boy he knew to be Uchiha Sasuke held the hilt of a katana whose blade was surrounded by what seemed to be a solid aura of fire. The fire burned straight through his foreleg, cutting almost cleanly in half and leaving behind two thick walls of glass. The boy jerked his sword out, black eyes blazing with hate as he jumped up and reversed his grip. With a battle cry, he dove towards Gaara, sword poised as he reached the apex of his jump at quite an impressive height. Shikaku growled, slamming the pest with his damaged arm and shattering the hot glass as it collided with a massive tree trunk. The boy disappeared into the foliage, and Shikaku had serious doubts that he would be getting up. The huge beast turned back around and started to walk forward, its golden eyes refocusing on the village of Konoha in the distance. It stopped short, however, at the figure standing on air calmly in front of it, glaring at him with just the hint of a smirk on his lips. Shikaku was too stunned to do anything. I have to thank you, Naruto told him calmly, a victorious gleam in his eyes. Only 3 flowers remained. If you hadn't left me alone for as long as you did, I wouldn't have had the time to do this. Naruto's sword rose until it was perpendicular to his torso, the flat sides of the blade perpendicular to the ground. Quickly, and before Shikaku could do anything to stop them, several pillars rose from the ground until they formed a makeshift cage around the beast's body. If it tried to escape, it would have to jump over the pillars, and for a creature of its large size, that would be nearly impossible. Naruto turned his sword so that the flats of the blade were parallel with the ground, Senin Hyoro. Shikaku reared back as the pillars rushed in and trapped him, locking him in a thick, square prison that left only his head free. Immediately he could see the effects of the technique as ice crept over his form at an amazing speed. He extended his neck as much as he could, screaming as the ice consumed all but Gaara. Naruto landed atop the great beast's raised snout, staring down into the dull eyes as Gaara awoke and started to panic. Naruto brought his sword up above his head, then swung downwards, stabbing his blade into the frozen creature beneath his feet as a cry left his lips, "Ha!" For a second, nothing seemed to happen as Gaara screamed and writhed in his prison of ice. Then, hairline cracks formed from the point of contact, slowly and steadily thickening as they began to move deeper through the tall beast. With a loud snap, the ice prison and Shikaku both shattered into thousands of tiny shards and Gaara fell to the ground. Naruto gazed down at the spot where Gaara had fallen, seeming to think something over for a few seconds. In a blur, he disappeared from his place in the air. For the size of his body and the weight that the tail and wings had to add, he moved at an incredible speed. He reappeared in a small clearing, Gaara's teal eyes going wide as Naruto materialized several feet from his weak and vulnerable form. The blonde turned his gaze towards the redhead, his expression unreadable. Gaara shrugged his shoulders alternatively, trying to back away from the monstrous power in front of him. "Stay away!" he cried, backing up 1 inch at a time. "My existence will not vanish." Calmly, Naruto walked up to the downed boy, who had, by this time, managed to lean himself up against a tree trunk. His eyes widened as the blonde poised his sword to strike. With a fearful grunt, Gaara closed his eyes as Naruto's gleaming silver steel came rushing towards him. He prepared himself as best he could for the pain of pierced flesh and the blackness of death. It never came. Hesitantly, the sand shinobi opened his eyes, looking to his left, where Naruto's blade was embedded in the thick bark. His gaze flickered over to his opponent, watching as the wings, tail, feet, and dragon's head made of ice crumbled and evaporated into thin air. The calm determination on the blonde's face had not changed at all. "Why?" Gaara asked, even as Naruto bent over him and started checking his wounds. "Why didn't you kill me?" "I killed." "No, you didn't," Naruto told him calmly, his voice quiet. "As long as a person is alive, no matter how much chakra they have, they will continue to emit Riryoku in a small but constant stream. Sasuke's Riryoku has yet to vanish." Gaara listened but didn't really understand. "Why are you?" "Wounds of the flesh can be healed, Gaara. It just takes time," Naruto interrupted him again. He sighed, hand glowing white as he tended to the redhead's injuries. "Wounds of the heart, though, can only be healed with love." Naruto leaned back as he finished. "I look in your eyes and I see what I could have been if I hadn't been shown any love or compassion." Gaara listened intently as Naruto continued, "If it hadn't been for the old man, I'd—" The blonde's eyes suddenly widened to impossible widths, startled realization fluttering across his face. "Shit! The old man!" There was a sharp flare of chakra and then a second Naruto puffed into existence, kneeling dutifully before the original. Naruto turned a calm cold gaze to his doppelganger. "Take Gaara somewhere safe and wait out the invasion. Use force only if you have no other options." With a nod, the shadow clone picked up the shocked redhead and slung him over its shoulder, disappearing in the soft whoosh of Shuinpa like a curtain fluttering in the breeze. Sensing it move beyond his perception, he turned his gaze toward the wavering Riryoku that he knew belonged to the old man. "Are you going to use that?" Hyarinmaru asked him calmly, its smooth underbelly pressing lightly against his bare arm. "I have to," Naruto responded, not even moving his eyes. To him, Hyarinmaru materializing next to him was an everyday thing. "I've almost completely drained my Riryoku. Between fighting Niji, Bankai, and healing Gaara, I have got very little left." "I see what you mean," came the reply, the dragon conceding his point. "Yet your chakra." "My chakra is mostly untouched," Naruto finished for him. "I have since recuperated what I lost during my match with Niji. The last significant drain was when I used that Suryuden against Shikaku. I've recovered the majority of what I lost to that, as well." "I see," Hyarinmaru said, turning a serious gaze towards the blonde. "You realize, however, that this is untested. You only saw the Toad Sage's technique once. That's all you managed to bribe out of him." "I know," Naruto sighed. "Are you ready, Hyarinmaru? This skill will merge us far further than we were originally meant to." "I am as prepared as I can be," the dragon answered honestly. "If this is irreversible, then so be it. We shall die and that it is that. I am prepared to back whatever decision you make. If death is the price we must pay to save those precious to you, then I know you will gladly pay it. I am prepared to pay that price as well." "Good," Naruto flashed through several hand seals, his fingers blurring beyond recognition. Blue eyes were sharp as he finished, naming his technique, Kinjutsu, Ryujin no Torai. Chakra flared as Hyarinmaru vanished from his side, melting into his body instead of fading from view. Round pupils thinned into slits, the blue irises deepening into crystal nady. Muscles twitched as chakra enhanced them artificially, strengthening them beyond normal human limitation. The flesh of his right shoulder blade beneath the black vest rippled, tearing through the fabric as it morphed and twisted. Feathers appeared, stretching over the growing flesh sprouting from the blonde's shoulder. A few seconds later, a wing covered in pitch black feathers was folded proudly against his back. The transformation ended and Naruto stood straight, flexing his new appendage as he inspected the changes to his body. "So this is 50%, eh?" he mused, he voiced slightly deeper. "We guess 100% would give us 2 wings, but we don't think this body could take the stress of the full technique." He grinned slightly as he clenched his right hand, an audible hiss of air escaping between his fingers. "Erosenen's Sage Mode has nothing on this." Now, he scolded himself in a much deeper and calmer voice. No matter how impressive this technique may look, we still wouldn't be able to fight one of the Sannin head to head. Gently, he lifted off the ground, hovering effortlessly. He grinned. So, when we're using the power of a dragon, whether Bankai or this form, we can fly under our own power without the need for wings or such the like. His expression became serious as he turned his gaze toward the Chunin exam stadium, his altitude steadily increasing. Hang on, old man. We're coming. In an explosion of movement, he soared off towards the Sandame's flickering and fading Riryoku. He would not let the old man die, no matter what it took. Sandame coughed up blood, grimacing as he glared at Orochimaru. There was no need for me to dodge the blade. This jutsu is a forbidden skill that costs the caster his life. It is a powerful sealing jutsu that stopped even the biggest threat Konoha had ever faced. What? Orochimaru hissed. You don't mean, the Kyuubi no Yoko? Ack. Damn you, old man. The Sandame suddenly blinked, looking at something behind his wayward student with surprise. Orochimaru twisted his head around, shock flitting across his face as he looked through the translucent purple barrier to see the face of the one he least expected floating several feet off the ground. An angry Uzumaki Naruto stood with his sword drawn, reciting an incantation. Sprinkled on the bones of the beast, he cried, pointing both palms toward the barrier. All creation, flutter of wings. Move and become the wind, stop and become the calm. Truth and temperance, upon this wall of sinless dream unleash but slightly the wrath of your claws. Heido no Senjusen and Rokujusen, so Katsui Raikoho. As Naruto broke through the barrier, Sandame saw his chance with Orochimaru's distraction and tugged harder on the snake Sennin's soul, watching as it would be pulled no further than the perverse man's precious arms. His dark grimace deepened as Naruto's seething form hovered into the barrier, which closed up behind him. If you hurt the old man, the blonde spoke in a voice slightly deeper than normal. Sarutobi wondered for a brief moment if perhaps the Kyuubi had taken over, but dismissed the thought when he could feel no foul energy. We'll kill you ourselves. That stole the Sandame's attention for a moment. Naruto was speaking as though he were two people merged into one. The old man's eyes flickered to the black feathered wing protruding from his favorite genin's shoulder, and he wondered just what had happened to the boy. There was a power exuding from the boy that was easily Jonin level, though it most certainly couldn't match the power he and Orochimaru were capable of. A thought entered his head unbidden as he recalled who had been teaching the blonde for the better part of a month. Had Jiraiya taught the boy a technique to match his sage mode? The third mentally shook himself free of such thoughts, knowing that Jiraiya would never be so irresponsible as to teach such a dangerous skill to a mere genin. Sarutobi shook himself from all thoughts pertaining to the blonde, knowing that they wouldn't matter in a moment or two. He would have to trust that the next Hokage would help the boy with any problems he had. Now, the old man turned his attention to the astral arms in front of him, tugging on the evil man's soul once more. It didn't budge. I guess this is my limit. Were it not for this sword, I would be able to take all his soul. Damn. It doesn't matter, he cried aloud, tugging as hard as he could one last time. He managed to pull the right shoulder out too, guaranteeing that he was taking 2 arms and a lung. The seal is set. The end is now. Shiki Fuin! Fuin! With a hiss that only the caster and the target could hear, a gleaming silver blade came down and severed the left arm, right shoulder, and right arm from Orochimaru's soul, sealing them inside the Sandame's body. With a dark sizzle, the seal pattern drew itself on the elder man's torso as he fell backwards and Orochimaru's arms began to blacken. As Sarutobi hit the roof with a soft thud, Orochimaru's arms fell to his sides limply. Naruto rushed to the third side as the snake Sannin stared at his useless arms with something akin to horror and disbelief. Even before he kneeled down, though, Naruto knew instinctually that the old man was dead and gone. One of his precious people had died. You see now, old fool! Orochimaru yelled, glaring at his former teacher and ignoring Naruto. Look what you've done! Come back to life so I can kill you again! Orochimaru, the snake Sannin, stopped his rant as Naruto stood up, his voice cold. The blonde turned, frigid blue eyes freezing the evil man in place. We warned you that if you hurt the old man. A vicious aura lit up, surrounding the boy in a white haze. We'd kill you ourselves. He moved forward to attack, sword poised for the snake man's heart. Before he could make it there, however, a fist slammed into his body and sent him crashing into the tiles beneath him. They cracked and crumbled and Naruto slipped into unconsciousness, his black wing evaporating into the air. Sakan stared at the blonde for a moment, then rushed forward to help his master as the barrier collapsed. The other members of the Sound Four did likewise as the ANBU came down on them, swords set to kill. Kidamaru knocked them back as his comrades moved on, then followed them swiftly. The ANBU cursed as they pulled at the webbing that tied them down. No more than a minute later, the wide lavender eyes of a Hyuga widened as their female owner rushed to the aid of her most precious person. Thankfully, all he suffered from was exhaustion and some minor bruising. Sabaku no Gara would later stumble into the Konoha hospital, searching for a certain blonde that had extended a hand of friendship. He would remain by the boy's side for the entirety of his remaining stay. It was a most dark day in Konoha as the Sandame's body was carried away. A most dark day indeed. The room was dark, luminous numbers glowing from their place in its occupant's alarm clock. The windows were closed, covered by curtains to block out the daylight that would normally stream in. The entire room was silent, save for the quiet breathing of its owner and tenant. Clothes were strewn all over the floor haphazardly, laying on the surface over top of the hardwood. The door to his closet was ajar, showing the world all of the outfits he had stashed inside of it. They were all identical: a black sleeveless turtleneck vest, a pair of loose black pants, a black belt with a silver buckle, and 2 black sandals. The bed sheets were a simplistic white, pristine and clean amongst the messy room and dark clothing he normally wore. The pillows were large and fluffy, though he had bought them at 3 times the normal price. He had saved up 2 months' worth of his biweekly stipend from the Hokage just to buy those pillows. The bright blue letters of his alarm clock read 9:52 a.m., glaring at him through the blackness of his room. Sunlight, bleak and weak behind the dark clouds in the sky, tried in vain to break into the inky gloom, blocked by the heavy curtains over the windows. Dim Sapphire stared dully at the floor. These feelings, he thought to himself, his expression blank, what are they? An image flashed into his brain of a dark-haired girl with pale eyes, her face lighting up in a fiery blush that no amount of her willpower could quell. His heart skipped a beat, as though it thought about quitting its job as a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Those pale lavender eyes lit up in happiness, a small smile breaking over the girl's face. 3 days had passed since the Sandame had died, leaving behind a village without a Hokage to protect it. 2 days afterwards he had woken up in the hospital with a concerned Hyuga hovering over his bed and a bouquet of flowers on the nightstand next to it. He had been discharged a few hours later. Truthfully, nothing had actually been physically wrong with him. Besides a few bruises, he hadn't had any wounds, and even if he had they would have healed quickly. He hadn't broken any bones, so there was nothing to set. He hadn't even had so much as a measly little paper cut. There hadn't been anything wrong with him. Except exhaustion. Hinata had told him that he had been admitted to the hospital with a severe case of chakra exhaustion. The doctors had said, according to her, that he was so low on chakra, he was likely to slip into a coma. Thankfully, though the doctors had known this, the QB wouldn't have let something like that happen. What threw him for a loop was that the doctors actually treated him like a normal patient. Ever since he had gotten home, however, he had been thinking about one thing and one thing only: Hinata. Or rather, how he felt about her. It was confusing, just as much as it was soothing. He hadn't felt anything like it before, not even with Sakura. Chasing after Sakura had been a plea for attention more than anything else, though there had been some measure of attraction to it as well. With Hinata, however, things were so much different. He was suddenly noticing things about her that he hadn't before. Her blush was suddenly a blush and not a fever, and it was suddenly cute as well. Her eyes were no longer creepy, but oddly pretty and majestic, like some sort of rare jewel. His perception of her personality had changed as well. Before, no more than a month ago, he had thought of her as that dark, weird girl. Now, she was shy and timid and peaceful, but strong and graceful at the same time. There was a certain beauty to her as well, like he was staring as an angel every time he looked at her. "I've never felt this way before," he muttered to himself, eyes narrowed as he stared at the floor like it was the most interesting thing in the world. He tried to imagine something happening to her, something horrible. He tried to imagine Hinata on the edge of death, gasping as the life left her eyes. An unthinkable despair took hold of his heart, clenching it tightly as a thick block of ice plopped into his stomach like a glacier swaying in the sea. He imagined a tall man with dark hair and pale skin, yellow eyes with slit pupils laughing at him as the man bared his teeth in a triumphant smirk. He imagined that this man, Orochimaru, was standing over the dead Hinata he had imagined earlier and felt an insurmountable rage take hold of himself. He squashed the feeling mercilessly, like a bug beneath his shoe, reminding himself that it was all a part of his imagination. Still, the dark and vengeful emotion lingered, and would linger until he avenged Sarutobi's demise. He pushed the thought away as guilt and pain threatened to consume him, moving towards his original train of thought. "Why?" he asked silently, his mouth forming the words as no sound escaped. "Why do I feel this way?" There comes a time in every man's life where he must admit that the truth is, Hyarinura spoke to him quietly, he's fallen in love. "Fallen in love," Naruto echoed, equally as quiet. I don't know about that. The dragon did not reply, vanishing into thin air as a knock echoed throughout the small room. A second later, the door opened to reveal the somber form of Hatake Kakashi, his little orange book conspicuously absent from his hands. Dressed in a black funeral uniform, his sensei looked every bit the morning man he was supposed to be. Naruto, the serious and ominous tone to Kakashi's voice shook Naruto from his reverie. It's time. Nodding numbly, the blonde stood up quietly, slipping on a pair of black sandals as he went. Silent as a ghost, he followed his gray-haired sensei out of his apartment and through the streets. He knew what the older man had meant with those 3 words. He had been trying to avoid thoughts about the event for the sake of his sanity, but eventually, the real world came back to bite you. It was time for Saratobi's funeral. It's raining, Naruto noted quietly, watching as, one by one, the large procession stepped up to the casket and laid a white lily or chrysanthemum atop it. Each of them said his or her goodbyes quietly, so as not to disturb the thoughts or grief of others present. Each and every person was wearing identical black uniforms, dressed the part of mourning friends and family. Rain poured down from the heavy black clouds above, soaking all that stood in front of the large wooden box that held their sandaime. It was fitting, Naruto thought, that the heavens would cry for the old man when he could not. He had run out of tears in the hospital, crying on Hinata's shoulder. Dull Sapphire watched the proceedings with a soft apathy, their owner silent as thick globs of water pattered against the hard ground. A dense droplet ran down his nose, dripping off the edge and falling to the stone below. His thoughts were a chaotic mesh of guilt, pain, and confusion. The only sign of the torrent of emotion was the twitch of his lips. By all accounts, he supposed that he shouldn't be placing the blame for the old man's death on his own shoulders. But he couldn't help but feel as if it was his fault the Sandaime Hokage had died. If he had been a little bit stronger, if he had been just a little bit faster, he may have been able to save the grandfatherly man. Logically, he knew that no amount of extra strength would have helped him defeat Orochimaru in time to save the old Hokage. The elderly man had gone into battle with no intention of surviving to see the next day. He had known that he would die facing down Orochimaru, and he had died knowing that he had protected his village the best he could. Naruto sighed almost imperceptibly. That didn't make it any easier to say goodbye to the elderly ninja, though, and there was still a small amount of guilt telling him that he could have saved Saratobi. The hardest part was watching those closest to the old man suffer in their grief. Konoha sobbed a few feet away, and Naruto wished he could comfort the young boy, but knew that nothing he could say would dry the boy's tears. Iruka was explaining death to the kid, about how people's dreams and beliefs died with them, but they continued to live on in the people who were precious to them. If possible, Konohamaru's sobs seemed to get louder. Looking around, Naruto noticed that Kakashi had disappeared from the crowd, as though he were a specter that had guided his student here, and then vanished into the wind. Naruto frowned in thought, and then realized that his teacher was probably visiting the memorial stone that he had told his students about. Naruto felt a small bit of pity for Kakashi, knowing that the older man had lost so much already. To lose the Sandaime, a grandfather to all that lived in his village, it must have been a harsh and painful blow. Naruto sighed. He doubted Orochimaru would ever realize or regret just how many people he had hurt that day. He turned his gaze, watching as Hinata lay a white flower atop the coffin, then bowed to it, her lips moving silently as she said something to the dead Hokage. As she stood again, she turned and walked away, following her family back home. Faintly, he could see pearly tears hovering at the edges of her eyes. Finally, after what seemed like hours, it was his turn. He had no flower, as the parting gift he would give Sandaime would be a little more lasting and permanent. Slowly, the eyes of the procession on his back, he walked up to the thick wooden casket. For a long moment, he only stared at the smirking face in the picture. He held out his empty hand, knowing that everyone was watching him like a hawk. He focused chakra, almost frowning as every ninja present tensed at his action, and concentrated on what he was going to do. Slowly, the particles of water in the air condensed and twisted to his will. A shape began to form, after a few seconds, the water flowing over his palm and dancing as it shifted. The rain seemed to bend around the object that was forming, or else it merged with the water already there. Finally, after a minute of intense focus and concentration, a perfect rose made of ice sat in his hand. Imbued with his chakra and made from his special abilities, it would never melt. I know that you probably can't hear me, he set the flower down, knowing that everyone was listening. Light reflected off the ice, but I'm going to miss you. You did a lot for me, and for this village. He sighed. I know you died the way you wanted to die. You died defending the village. But that doesn't make it any easier for you to be gone. Konohamaru won't stop crying, you know. He keeps begging me to do something, to bring you back. He chuckled lightly, but I wouldn't, even if I could. Something tells me that you're finally getting some much-deserved rest. I wouldn't take that from you, force you back into our world, so full of responsibility. He sighed again. I know that you'd tell me not to and that you'd lecture me that it wouldn't bring any closure or satisfaction, but I'm going to do what I feel I need to anyway. I'm angry at you, old man, for leaving behind so much pain. But I'm angrier at Orochimaru. His eyes sharpened. I'm going to kill him. The Hokage's eyes suddenly seemed stern and accusing. I know, vengeance isn't worth it in the end. I'm not doing it just for me. I'm doing it for all of the people he hurt by killing you. He bowed, then stood straight again. Next time I see you, I'll be as old as you are, Hokage-sama. With his part said, he turned around and walked back towards the rest of the procession, feeling their eyes on him. In a blur and a soft swoosh, like that of a curtain billowing in the wind, he disappeared in front of everyone. He reappeared walking down the empty street, rain splattering against his clothes and hair, dripping down his face. His eyes had returned to their dull sapphire, staring listlessly at the wet, soggy streets that seemed to stretch on forever. The roar of droplets pounding against the hard earth filled his ears with a loud buzz. Hey kid, a familiar voice called quietly, halting his walk. He looked up to the direction of the voice, his dull blue eyes blinking as rain bled into them. Jiraiya stood leaning up against the wall of a shop, his arms folded across his chest and his chiseled face set in a serious look. The older man's frown was grim, his hair somehow dry while the rest of the world was wet. Naruto frowned himself, turning away as he made to move onward.